Order. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Public Bills Committee for March 24th, 2026 to order. I'd like to welcome everyone to One Government Place. My name is Scott Armstrong, Minister of Justice and Attorney General. I'll be chair for today's meeting. I'd now like to ask all our committee members to introduce themselves, starting with the government members.
Good morning, Tim Outfit, MLA for Bedford Basin.
Good morning, Brad McGowan, the MLA for Cold Harbor Dartmouth.
Good morning, Rick Burns, MLA for Hemmons Plains Lucasville.
Good morning, Julie Van Exen, King South.
Ian Rankin, Timberley Prospect.
Paul Wozni, Sackville Cobequid, and I use he, him pronouns.
Good morning, Claudia Chender, MLA for Dartmouth South.
I'll now ask members of the Legislative Council to introduce themselves as well.
Gordon Hebb, Council to the Committee.
Genevieve Harvey, Legislative Council.
Thank you. To start, I'd like to address some housekeeping items. I'll ask that everyone in the room turn off your phones or put them on silent. In case of emergency, please use the Granville Street exit and walk up to Grand Parade. I'll ask everyone in attendance to remain respectful, to avoid indicating approval or disapproval of what is being said, and to refrain from any disorderly conduct. Anyone exhibiting disorderly behavior may be asked to leave. Taking pictures or videos is restricted to accredited media only. And finally, presenters are not to use any props. The agenda for today, listing in order which presenters will be provided to speak, is available for viewing at the table in the front corner of the room. All presenters were required to provide prior notification to the Legislative Office that they were speaking on the bill. We will proceed from that list. All submissions on a bill that are received via email until the time the bill was reported back to the House or in person during Law Amendments meeting will be given to the library staff and be posted online. Submissions received after a bill has been reported back to the House are distributed electronically to members of the committee but are not posted on the website. When your name is called, please come forward, state your name and how you would like the committee to address you and the organization, if any, you will be representing. In order to allow for all the scheduled presenters to speak, we'll be keeping track of time. Each presenter will receive a set amount of time to make their remarks, followed by answering any of the questions posed by committee members for up to 5 minutes. I will alert you when there's 1 minute left in your speaking time and when your time is up. Presenters today will receive 5 minutes to speak, followed by 5 minutes of question time. Any presenters after that will receive, I'll skip down here. If presenters have handouts for committee members, please hand them to the pages for distribution. Each committee member may ask one question at a time per presenter with no follow-up. If there's extra time afterwards, I will allow a second question. I'd like to remind presenters and committee members that you need to be recognized by the chair before you speak, so your mic is on and your comments will be captured. Also like to remind presenters and committee members that today, the bill we're discussing today is the Financial Measures Act, Bill 198. Please refer your comments to that bill, and we'll try to keep everybody on track. The first witness to testify today is Amy Whitewall. Good morning.
Morning.
So please introduce yourself, indicate any organization you may be representing, and then we'll have 5 minutes for your statement.
Great. My name's Amy Udawal. I'm presenting as a constituent of the Preston riding, a board member of the Festival of Dance Annapolis Royal, and primarily as the executive director of Halifax Dance.
Fantastic. Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you. Throughout Bill 198, numerous clauses have been proposed that support for-profit businesses, but there are no clauses that directly reflect the many cuts to the cultural sector of our province, the majority of which are nonprofits. Clause 67 extends the capital investment tax credit to 2035, reinforcing long-term support for capital-intensive industries. Organizations like mine, however, are not capital-driven. We're people-driven. We rely on instructors, musicians, and artists to deliver our programs, and when funding is reduced, it directly impacts jobs, wages, and access to programming in our community. With Clause 62 exempting casinos from the deed transfer tax, the government is making a choice that reduces public revenue. That raises a broader question. Where is that revenue being recovered? It seems to me like it's being taken from sectors like ours. As you have heard and will continue to hear from many deserving organizations that stand to lose up to 30% of their funding, I'm actually speaking to you today as an organization that has been unable to secure operating funding from the province. The funding available, even before the cuts, is already not enough to go around. But despite that reality, Halifax Dance continues to serve our community in many ways. We're a hub for the dance community, home to numerous dance organizations and professional artists. You'll find busy studios full of creative people every day of the week. We offer programming that benefits the community, including our Inclusive Movement program for dancers with disabilities, Aging Actively program for older adults, and our Step Together program for newcomers to Canada. We are a producing partner in Symphony Nova Scotia's production of The Nutcracker each year, a much larger arts organization that stands to be impacted by these cuts as well. We also provide childcare during our camps, and I know many other arts organizations are doing the same to help fill the gap in childcare for working families. But most importantly, our core work is to educate. We train young dancers who will go on to become the artists, performers, cultural workers, and creative, thoughtful citizens of tomorrow. We are proud of the roles we play, but even as an organization that does not receive operating funding, we are not insulated from these cuts. The artists and instructors we rely on for these programs are independent workers whose livelihoods depend on a wide variety of income sources to make a livable wage. And if the ecosystem that exists to facilitate this is disrupted, they will leave. The cultural communities here are so interconnected that the ripple effects of these cuts will stretch so much further than the government is seeing. We have a membership of around 500 dancers from 2 years old to 70 who fill the 10,000 square feet that we lease in the Maritime Center, a building that needs tenants. 30% of our annual expenses are on rent. More than 45% of our budget goes to paying instructors, musicians, and administrators. These workers pay taxes. Every Saturday, nearly 300 students come downtown for class. Often their families stop at the market, a coffee shop, other local stores, and reinvest in our community. For every $1 that the government contributes in grants, recipients generate $4.59 in other revenue. But beyond economics, there's also a fundamental misunderstanding about the work that artists do. I saw comments online about our protests asking, shouldn't these people be at work? And it makes it blatantly obvious that so many people don't understand what we do. If we all work 9 to 5s in corporate offices, what would we all go home to at the end of the day? There would be no TV shows to watch, no art on our walls to look at, no performances to attend, no music to listen to. Thanks to arts and culture workers, our community is vibrant. We leave our families on nights and weekends so that you can gather, connect, and feel a part of something. These cuts also have equity impacts. Women make up a disproportionately large share of the cultural workforce, and our organizations are also catalysts for equity, accessibility, and inclusion, and are working hard to ensure that all residents of Mi'kma'ki have space to imagine and create. Festivals like the Festival of Dance at Annapolis Royal are major economic drivers for rural communities, generating over $1.3 million in new arts spending. Across Nova Scotia, arts and culture contributes billions to the economy, yet provincial investment remains among the lowest in the country at less than 1% of the annual budget. The arts are not separate from the economy. They are not separate from childcare or tourism or small businesses or healthcare. We are all part of it. So when funding is reduced in one part of the ecosystem, the effects are felt everywhere. The arts are what create a home, and the clauses set out in the Financial Measures Act threaten to destroy this home that we have built. It is imperative to me that my kids live in a province that respect the arts and culture and make the province what it is. I hope that they learn to use their voices to stand up for what is right. Whew. And this bill is not right. Arts organizations in Nova Scotia are resilient. We are resourceful. We stretch every dollar that we receive. We bring other communities along with us, but we are all connected. We cannot build a thriving community if the foundation beneath us keeps shrinking. I urge you to go back to the drawing board, find more ways to invest in the artists and organizations and communities that make Nova Scotia a place that people want to live.
Thank you very much for your statement. We'll now open the floor for 5 minutes of questioning. Go ahead. MLA Chender.
Thank you, Ms. Udall. I really appreciate your presentation. I also feel very moved by it as a parent whose children have benefited from the arts so much. I want to ask what you're hearing. You mentioned all of the independent workers that make up the staff at Halifax Dance, but also the Festival of Music, also Symphony Nova Scotia, all the places that you represent. What are you hearing from cultural workers right now vis-a-vis their employment prospects? And in particular, as you said, kind of sticking around if this infrastructure shrinks?
Mrs. Udall.
Thanks. Yeah, people are nervous. People are very nervous about what's coming. Most of the small organizations already work with such a shoestring budget that a 30% cut is huge. It cuts entire programmings. A lot of these organizations have plans for years ahead, and those plans are already being changed. And so they're losing jobs, and they're looking elsewhere. If Halifax Dance loses some of our independent artists, then we don't have teachers to teach our classes. And so while we're not directly impacted by these cuts, the ripple effect is huge, and that's what I'm concerned that people aren't understanding, that this is such a larger decision than just affecting the people that, right in front of it.
Further questions? MLA Chender.
So I wanted to ask specifically about, you mentioned 2 programs, so the Inclusive Movement Program, 3, I guess, and the Aging Program, and then working with newcomers. Do you find that folks are getting referred to those programs by social service agencies or government where there are you filling a gap that is required?
Mrs. Udall. Sorry.
Yeah, we definitely are. So we actually are contacted by other organizations to help facilitate those programs. So the Step Together program, for instance, was built out of a need by the YMCA that they recognized that their newcomers were having a hard time integrating into the community, and this is an area where they can come to Halifax Dance and dance with other kids that they have met through the YMCA, and also integrate into programming that we already have at Halifax Dance. And dance is just a universal language, so it allows people to really connect in ways at every age, at every ability, and so we use that as a tool to kind of make space for all of these people. Yeah.
See no more questions. Thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you.
We appreciate you coming in. We'll call upon our next witness, Heather Fagan. Thank you very much for coming today. Please introduce yourself, indicate any organization you may be representing, and you'll have 5 minutes to make a statement, followed by questions from MLAs. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Heather Fagan, and I'm the Executive Director of the Atlantic Publishers Marketing Association.
Go ahead.
The APMA is an industry support organization representing book publishers located in Atlantic Canada, and the majority of our members are here in Nova Scotia. We believe a vigorous Atlantic-owned and controlled book publishing industry is essential to the economic, cultural, educational, and social life of Atlantic Canada. The APMA works towards growing and maintaining a strong Canadian-owned book publishing industry in Atlantic Canada because our cultural sovereignty depends on it. I'm here today to speak to Bill 198, the Financial Measures Act, and the specific legislative changes within this act and its implications. I'm here because I am deeply concerned about what this bill sets in motion, particularly for Nova Scotia's book publishing industry and more broadly for the arts and culture sector. The Financial Measures Act reshapes how revenue is generated, how it is reduced, and ultimately where financial decisions are made. And in this case, the changes proposed in Bill 198 are helping to create the very deficit used to justify financial decisions that gravely affect sectors like ours. For example, clauses 62, 63, and 64 introduce measures that eliminate or reduce existing provincial revenue streams, which include exempting the casino from transfer tax and the Bridge Commission Dissolution Act, simultaneously eliminating support for industries that generate economic return. These decisions reduce government revenue, and with revenue reduced, the result's predictable. Someone pays the price, and there are consequences. For example, the elimination of the Nova Scotia Publishers Assistance Program, a $700,000 investment. This fund has helped independent local presses bring books to market, supporting the publication of Nova Scotian authors, the employment of local staff and freelancers, and the circulation of books to schools, libraries, bookstores, and readers throughout the province and across Canada. Collectively, Nova Scotia's independent publishers release more than 100 new books each year and play an essential role in documenting the province's stories, histories, and perspectives. Books are the embodiment of our culture. Independent publishers discover, develop, and promote local authors. Without the $700,000 in funding provided to publishers annually, a modest but essential support, fewer Nova Scotian stories will be written, published, and shared. The elimination of the Publishers Assistance Fund is a shocking about-face from the government's previously held position that the province is renowned for our storytellers, affirmed with the launch of the Nova Scotia Loyal Book Industry Pilot Program. The storytellers are now being left behind. The Nova Scotia Loyal Pilot Program, a short-term retail promotion that has now ended, is not comparable to the targeted investment previously provided through the Publishers Assistance Program. The Cultural Industries Fund was also reduced, so now a smaller pot will need to stretch much further across the industry as affected organizations turn to it. Nova Scotia will become the only province in the country that does not invest in its own publishing sector, at a time when other jurisdictions are strengthening their commitment to our industry. For example, British Columbia recently making its publishing tax credit permanent. This move risks isolating Nova Scotia's publishers and weakening the province's economy. Book publishers in Nova Scotia are small businesses. They employ people, pay taxes, export intellectual property, and contribute to tourism, education, and cultural visibility. They are part of a broader ecosystem that attracts people to live here, raise families here, and invest here. Some publishers will not survive. One has already stopped accepting submissions. Nova Scotians will lose their jobs. Fewer creators will make a living in their field. The livelihoods of authors, editors, freelancers, graphic designers, and other creative workers across the sector who depend on sustained provincial investment are at risk. Another example of an implication stemming from the Financial Measures Act is the reduction of over $14 million to communities, culture, tourism, and heritage grants across 72 programs. To put that in perspective, that $14 million represents just 0.08% of the province's nearly $19 billion budget. This will not meaningfully move the needle on the province's fiscal challenges, but it will have outsized, lasting consequences that will devastate sectors that generate revenue, create jobs, and contribute to the identity and global presence of Nova Scotia, as we're seeing in real time play out with the global best-selling author Rachel Reed, who's from Nova Scotia. So when we remove that investment, we're not saving money, we're shifting costs elsewhere. So I have to ask, why does a casino receive a tax exemption while small, locally owned publishing companies lose essential investment?
You have about a minute left.
Why are we choosing to reduce stable, long-term economic drivers in favor of short-term fiscal optics? This is the fundamental issue with Bill 198. It is an omnibus bill combining multiple unrelated measures into a single piece of legislation. This makes it difficult to properly scrutinize, and it risks putting through changes that have wide and lasting consequences for Nova Scotians. All of this for savings that amount to a fraction of the percent of the provincial budget. Once programs like the Publishers Assistance Program are dismantled, they are incredibly difficult and costly to rebuild. The bill you are being asked to accept is unacceptable. You can make different choices. The province can choose to invest in industries that generate revenue and support working people and small businesses. Choose to build a province that's competitive and creative and compassionate. So I ask, who does the bill benefit, who was consulted, and what will it truly cost us? On behalf of the APMA and the industry I represent, I urge you to reject the Financial Measures Act as proposed and to reconsider the actions the bill's put in motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll open the floor for 5 minutes for questioning from MLAs. Just a reminder to MLAs, please frame your question around the FMA and Bill 198. MLA Wozni.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned Rachel Reed in your comments. I think everybody's attention is on the remarkable success that she has experienced. But really that got its start through the local publishing scene that you've outlined in your comments. You know, oftentimes we kind of reach a tipping point in an industry or a sector or a sport or whatever when somebody local kind of makes it big. And local kids and local folks can see themselves reflected in a space that they've never seen themselves before. At a time that Rachel Reed may inspire a generation of writers, the timing of these measures in this bill and the impact that you've outlined, what is your fear about the long-term impact of this cuts at a time that perhaps this might be the time to jump in and invest more in this sector to capitalize on a major win for our province?
Mrs. Fagan.
Well, just like you've said, fewer stories will be told, and so fewer opportunities for Nova Scotians to pursue their dreams, publishing a book here in Nova Scotia, and for children seeing themselves in stories that won't be able to be told because publishers will have to be reducing their seasons by half. And there won't be that thriving industry that kids can come up through being involved in the sector, having authors come to their classrooms, being able to access their local publishers here at home.
MLA Chender.
Thanks for your presentation. You mentioned a few sections in the FMA, in particular revenue, that might allow for the continuation of some of these things. I wonder, to your point, whether there was any conversation prior to the introduction of the FMA around maybe changes or funding or things that publishers might need to be successful going forward with government.
Mrs. Fagan.
There was no prior consultation. The rug was pulled out from underneath Nova Scotia book publishers without consultation, and we would love to discuss possible solutions or suggestions, things like the British Columbia model with the publishing tax credit, or perhaps, how book publishing, it wasn't just reduced, it was completely eliminated. That's ghosting a key cultural activity in the province, which is book publishing. While funding to invest in Nova Scotia and jobs in Nova Scotia has been increased, but there's not $700,000 for a full entire publishing program.
MLA Chender.
And I guess my question beyond that, you mentioned British Columbia. What are you hearing from your peers across the country about how their budget process or their FMA or their governments are supporting them?
Mrs. Fagan.
So there's been an incredible outpouring of support from across the country from our affiliates. So our association and every other province across the country, there's a joint coalition with the Association of Canadian Publishers, the Writers' Union of Canada, the Literary Press Group, the Writers' Federation of Nova Scotia, the Canadian Independent Booksellers Association, and even Indigo speaking out in their shock and dismay of what has happened with the Nova Scotia budget for book publishers.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation today. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Darcy Pulteney.
Sorry, I'm a bit of a pinch hitter. I got the call on the bus ride in this morning that I was going to present, and it was through the grace of a free Uber ride that I actually made it on time. So,
well, thank you for taking the time to come to see us. Please just state your name and the organization you are representing. And we'll have 5 minutes.
My name is Darcy Pulteney, and I represent Strategic Arts Management, and we are also a proud member of the Cultural Federation of Nova Scotia, CFNS. The CFNS is a provincial pivot point providing leadership, advocacy, and collective voice for organizations across every artistic discipline in the province. We represent the heartbeat of Nova Scotia's communities. Yet, despite our role as a primary economic engine, our attempts to engage in professional dialogue have been met with a wall of silence. We've asked for meetings with the Minister of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage repeatedly, only to receive no adequate response. We are here today because the proposed budget cuts are not merely belt tightening, they are dismantling of Nova Scotia's cultural infrastructure. The false dichotomy of yes. Last night I sat at the legislature and listened to a member from Inverness, Kyle McQuarrie, and he spoke passionately about saying yes to this budget, yes to community sports, yes to daycare, yes to seniors, and yes to housing. We agree that these are all essential services. However, the government's current stance suggests that for senior to have a bed or a child to have a daycare spot, the arts must be sacrificed. This is a false choice. Immediately after Mr. McQuarrie spoke, Sue LeBlanc reminded the House of a fundamental truth. With careful, prudent planning, we can say yes to everything. We can say yes to infrastructure. We can say yes to the arts, culture, and heritage that make Nova Scotia a place people actually want to live in. To suggest otherwise is to ignore the $2.6 billion our sector contributes to the provincial GDP and the 22,000 jobs we support. Targeted destruction of salmon, our heritage. The specifics of these cuts are staggering. Strategic Arts Management has been targeted with 100% funding cut. Since 2007, salmon...
Excuse me, Mr. Pulteney, the bill we're discussing today is the Financial Measures Act. It's Bill 198. And I realize you get thrown in this at the last minute. So the budget is not part of this bill. It's linked to the bill. But if you could try to frame your comments around, but when I'm going to give you lots of flexibility because I realized when you came in you were at the last minute, but just indicating that we're really focusing on a different piece of legislation. So go ahead.
Sort of pick up somewhere, I guess. Furthermore, the 20% reduction in the Association of Museums Nova Scotia is a death knell for our history. For many communities, museums, the reality is 100% loss of funding. When we close a museum, we aren't just saying a few dollars. You are locking away our shared history forever. Cuts to museums equals killing our past. Cuts to programs in schools equals killing our future, what is left. Investing in the pandemic generation, our children have endured the isolation of a global pandemic. They need every ounce of support we can offer to navigate their education and mental health. Yet these cuts threaten to the total cancellation of vital school programs in craft, choral, dance, theater, visual arts, and writing. Cultural programs for youth are proven methods for community safety and retention. By removing these programs, now you are creating a social deficit that future generations will pay for long after this government has left office. We must say yes to restoring these programs. And I also call for courageous leadership. After the session last night, I attempted to speak with my MLA, Tim Hellman, on the street. I wanted to share the reality of these cuts. Instead of engaging with a constituent, he hurried away, refusing to hear the impact these decisions would have on his own community. True leadership does not run from the people it serves, even when the conversation is difficult. The culture economics are clear. Nationally, every dollar invested in the arts yields $29 in economic activity. Cutting the sector isn't just a loss of spirit, it is objectively bad business. We call the committee and the provincial government to reinstate full operating funding to CFNS and its member organizations. Reverse the 100% cut to Strategic Arts Management, recognizing the artists need business support to create, grow, and thrive, especially at this time. Recognize that arts are an essential economic driver and not a frill to be discarded. Do not invest in Nova Scotia's decline. Choose to say yes to our past, our present, and our future.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'll now ask for 5 minutes of questions from MLAs. Seeing no questions, we thank you very much for coming today. Our next witness is Claire Halpern. Good morning. Thanks very much for coming in. Please identify yourself and the organization that you are representing, if any, and then we'll have 5 minutes for a statement.
Thank you for welcoming me here today. My name is Claire Halpern, and I'm representing Family SOS.
5 minutes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Dear committee members, I sit in front of you as a taxpayer, as a not-for-profit professional, as a mother, and as a community member. And one of the things I love about this small province is that we're all connected. When I look around the room, I see the brother of my former principal at my school, and the mother of a student at the school that goes into my children's class and helps them learn to read. That is our province, and that's amazing. While I could spend the next 5 minutes talking about myself and our community, I'm here to speak about Clause 64. As a Blue Noser who lives in Dartmouth and works in Spryfield, paying a bridge toll has never affected my quality of life. Traffic? Yes, that does. That's a different story. Many jurisdictions use tolls and levies to support public priorities. In BC, for example, gaming revenue is not general revenue. It's intentionally reinvested into communities through long-term structured grant programs. Removing a source of revenue while at the same time reducing funding to organizations that are delivering frontline services is not fiscally sound. Organizations like Family SOS are not add-ons to the system. We are part of it. We deliver frontline services. We do so efficiently by leveraging public funding alongside private donations and volunteers to deliver real impact and prevention services right here in our community. Oops. I'm here representing Family SOS, a family support organization founded by Dr. John Anderson, an emergency physician at the IWK. We have been funded by the Department of Opportunities and Social Development through a long-standing service agreement. This is not annual grant funding. Every year, we meet the obligations of our agreement and receive our funding to deliver services. That has been the case for 26 years, with our current agreement in place since 2019. Through economic ups and downs, the province has continued to fund the preventative services we provide. But with the broader fiscal direction reflected in Bill 198, and in particular Clause 64, our funding has been reduced to zero. I expect many of you have taken the time to learn and understand about the organizations facing these reductions. So I won't spend my time walking through the full story of Family SOS and the enormous community impact and intervention we not only provide in Spryfield, but across Nova Scotia. Instead, I'm going to share one voice. This is Ryan McLaughlin, a mother in Spryfield, who used our services, and because early intervention works, she is a past client and not a current client, and this is shared with her permission. I know how much this community relies on these services in our community because the Positive Parenting Group for Mothers certificate helped me keep my kids out of foster care. It helped me by keeping my kids out of foster care, and without this program, we would not have our children kept in our care. Because if it wasn't for you guys, I would not have my daughter in my care. Without this program, she would not have her daughter in her care. Tonight, Ryan gets to read her baby girl a story, tuck her into bed, and give her a goodnight hug and kiss. This is because of the Family SOS parenting program. Our work matters, Ryan matters, but most importantly, her daughter matters and deserves the support to allow her family to thrive.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll now open the floor for questions. MLA Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and great to see you here. I do want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about Family SOS, because I think with Clause 64 and giving up that much multi-million dollars of guaranteed revenue and completely annihilating the program you need to support families that you just mentioned, I think is just so disappointing. So it's worth repeating. Last night in the House, I asked in the estimates why this decision was made. The minister continuously relied on a statement that there is duplication in the services being offered by organizations, and that this was legacy funding given to Family SOS. So I just want to give you an opportunity to speak to the uniqueness of the program offering that you're providing, and that so many organizations that are government funded send your way. 8 of 10 referrals end up going your way. So just give you an opportunity to talk about the uniqueness part to refute that point of duplication.
Mrs. Halpern.
Yes, thank you. There are many programs, and that's a good thing. Everyone parents differently. Ian, issues you have with your children are different than issues I have with my children because we're all unique. We wouldn't live in a system where we only had one doctor. Why would we live in a world where we can only have one program? Different programs are going to feed different needs for families. And at the same time, we still get 8 out of our 10 referrals are from services, provincial services, the IWK, Justice, CPS, and Schools Plus. So that means a professional within that system knows our program, is referring to us because of that specific need of that child and that parent. So we should be applauding the system for having more than one program because people learn different ways, they communicate different ways, their children they're complex, they have different emotional regulation that they're dealing with. So yes, there might be other parenting programs out there, but it doesn't mean that ours aren't preventing people from going into foster care.
MLA Gender.
Thank you so much. Yeah, back to Clause 64 and foregoing the revenue such that we have to cut legacy programs, which is the argument that's been made. Last night, the minister also implied that it was only a couple of hundred kids that Family SOS serves, and I'm really glad you brought Ryan's voice into the room because we also heard the minister say, one child left behind is too many. Can you speak about the children that have been kept out of the minister's care, out of foster care, in a kind of more global sense so we can understand the impact of your programming?
Mrs. Halpern.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Well, our program has been around for, as I mentioned, 50 years. Obviously, as times evolve, our program has evolved. So I don't have the numbers in front of me of how many children we have helped over the past 50 years, but I agree with the minister. One child is too much, and if we can prevent one child, then I think we're doing our job and it's worth the money. Our program, again, we work one-on-one. We teach skills, and we're evidence-based. A lot of programs aren't based on the evidence, and so we are based on that.
MLA Wozni.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We've heard testimony from a number of very astute witnesses that have talked about sort of the absence of analysis or a business case for a decision. A previous witness talked to us about evaluating a cost-cutting measure. If you cut costs and you save money and it results in a landslide of other harms, did you really save anything? Were you approached, given your long-standing structural relationship with the Department of Opportunities and Social Development, were you approached, engaged in any kind of dialogue about how funding might be adjusted on a temporary basis in trying financial times to try to find a middle ground between no funding or some funding to make sure that the impact of your program is not lost?
Mrs. Halpern, very quickly.
No, we were not. And when I've spoken to other nonprofits that had cuts, they were approached ahead of time. And I think, as many people in the room know, our letter that arrived was to an ED that was from a decade ago and was the wrong amount. So that is another. We do now finally have a meeting with the department, so I look forward to that. But that's why I'm here today, because a cut was made. And they have the right information because we've received other correspondence, was made about an ED from over a decade ago and not the amount that is in our longstanding service agreement.
Thank you very much for your presentation today. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Move on to our next witness, which is Kenny Fitzpatrick. Good morning. Thank you very much for coming in. Could you please introduce yourself and indicate any organization you are representing? And then we'll open up for 5 minutes for a statement. Go ahead.
Absolutely. My name is Kenny Fitzpatrick. I am the Executive Director of Dance Nova Scotia and the current President of the Cultural Federations of Nova Scotia, as well as the founder of the QLGBTQ Creative Network.
Great. Thank you very much for coming in. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm here today to address Bill 198 and specifically Clause 64, which dissolves the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission and shifts full responsibility for the harbour bridges to the province. This locks in a financial and governance choice that deepens the budget's harms and cuts to arts, culture, heritage, and vulnerable communities. Last year, the government removed tolls from the McDonald and McKay bridges, giving up a stable revenue stream of about $36 million annually. That money funded maintenance for future planning. Now the province assumes those costs with no clear plan of where the funds will come from. At the same time, $130 million in grants were cut from over 7,000 community organizations, including arts, culture, nonprofits, senior supports, African, Nova Scotian, and Indigenous initiatives, and low-income families. So the pattern is clear. Remove a dedicated user pay source, then fill the hole by sacrificing communities with cuts to programs. You know the numbers. The arts generate $2.6 billion in GDP and support 20,000 jobs. You've heard from the experts and your constituents. You're just choosing to ignore them. But numbers don't capture the human cost. There are so many examples I could use, but for the sake of our time, let me tell you how slashing artists in schools and perform by 100% hurts our kids. Growing up in school, I felt that I had to hide my queerness. I struggled to understand who I was or if I was even valued. Something relatable to many kids today. I was alone, and it was a very dark place, until music, theater, and dance changed everything. In theater especially, I connected to the real me, realized I had talent, and I wasn't wrong, and saw that there was a place for me in the world. Because of the arts, I started to smile. It eased my depression and let me explore my identity. They taught me about other cultures and other histories and showed that our shared struggles, like the bullying I received for not being masculine enough, they also received for not being white or English. I started writing and directing my own plays. I found my voice through the arts, and as an outlet, I was able to not only help myself, but other kids around me. Without the arts in school, I genuinely don't know who I would be today or if I would be in my position serving my community. Now you're about to rob today's kids, your kids, of that lifeline. Imagine an African Nova Scotian child learning about the history of the 52 communities across the province from an African Nova Scotian painter. Kids learning about Acadian history through Acadian dance. Or a queer kid seeing themselves in a queer writer's work. #Rachel Reed. Through the arts, from artists, all in their classrooms. I could ramble on about numbers, ROIs, GDPs, things that are supposed to make the argument. But again, you already know the numbers, but I will give you one more. 5,000. That's how many kids lit up our screens across this province last year on International Dance Day. 5,000 kids in their classrooms learned dance routine from a senior dancer and a disabled dancer. They laughed and they bounced. It was pure joy and pure happiness. They didn't ask for anything more than that. And now that's being taken from them. They also learned what wheelchairs are and that you don't have to depend on them to dance, that you're not confined to things. There are over 130,000 kids in Nova Scotia schools. Don't deny them the education, connection, or salvation the arts provide. When you cut programs like Artists in Schools and Perform by 100%, you are taking away the one place in school where many young people can discover and be themselves. For many kids, the arts can be life-changing and it can be life-saving. The government calls the toll removal fair, since only 2 bridges had fees. But fairness isn't easing drivers' costs while pulling $130 million from programs for kids in poverty, seniors, African Nova Scotian communities, and the arts that bind and define us. So I ask you to please act. Amend Clause 64 to delay dissolving the commission until an independent financial and fiscal governance review is public. Restore the $130 million in community and arts grants, including Artists in Schools and Perform, and implement a required system of meaningful consultation with affected sectors. You have an opportunity to realign the province's financial measures with the values and priorities of the people you serve. Fairness, accountability, and support for the communities that make Nova Scotia worth defending. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll open the floor for 5 minutes of questioning. MLA Chender.
Thank you so much for your presentation. My girls participated in Sharing Dance Day during COVID, And I remember how meaningful that was. So seeing all those kids on the screen when they couldn't see their peers in real life. So that really brought that back. Thank you. You talk about the revenue that we're foregoing based on changes in the Financial Measures Act versus artists in schools, which I understand to be a tiny fraction of that revenue. But I think what we didn't touch on is the kind of equity lens. So when my daughters participated in Sharing Dance, it's because I was paying for them to participate in a dance program. But the kids who get it in school don't have to pay. Do you hear about the impact on that for families that might not otherwise have access to arts programming?
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
100%. Some of the things that we have to take into consideration is that things like dance can be expensive, and not every family can afford that. When you bring that into the school in a safe zone, in a safe space, they get to learn about it, to see if they even have a knack for it, but they also get to just enjoy and different cultures of it. And I'm just using dance as an example, and I mentioned kind of Acadian dance. We have a very rich Acadian population here. To learn about Acadian history through dance and maybe pick up the art form itself to keep that going, that's transformative.
MLA Wozni.
High school teacher speaking here. A lot of times we think about kids as, the little peepers in early elementary school, and boy, howdy do they matter. I remember when my kids were that small. But I can personally attest to, I'm an avid reader and writer, but I'm not an artist. And in teaching kids about poetry, about how you exercise your voice, how you speak up in this world through literature, having first voice folks come and talk to my kids about their practice of writing poetry, of writing literature, empowered me and empowered my students in a way I wasn't capable of on my own. I'm wondering if you can talk about the social impact of withdrawing that kind of empowerment from staff and from students in our public schools that diminishes our collective creativity and ability to innovate in society.
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
I think you have to look at who's in the room, and you have to think about what they bring to the table, right? There's histories there. There is culture that is there. There are traditions there. We learn from one another. We learn through, meeting somebody from a different country who just happens to be now a newcomer to Nova Scotia. Kids absorb that. And, when we think about what we can do socially, that's again, transformative. It changes how we look at one another. We shouldn't be denying our kids the ability to be in front of things that will change them for the better. We really shouldn't. But for me, even being in school, having access to things, and I'm old now, but things have changed so much, but they still are struggling to maintain having that kind of access. Giving it to them is transformative. It can change them from who they are today to the leaders that they could be tomorrow.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate you coming in today. We'll move on to our next presenter, who is virtual. It's Wayne, I think it's Boucher.
In the waiting room right now.
Not there?
He's been in and out, so I don't know.
We're a little bit early. Maybe we could go on to the next one and try to come back? Okay. So is Mary Dan Johnston in the room? Please come forward. And we'll try to get Wayne back on after. Thank you very much for coming in. Please introduce yourself, any organization you are representing, and we'll open up for 5 minutes for a statement and then questions from MLAs. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. I'm going to take off my glasses. My name is Mary Dan Johnston. I'm here on behalf of myself and my community. I'm not here representing any official organization, but I am here as a resident of our province all my life. I've basically lived in Halifax. And I'm an artist as well as someone who has a day job on the side. And normally I speak in my capacity in my day job, but today I'd like to speak in my capacity as an artist.
Go ahead, you have 5 minutes.
I'm 6 years old. At my first art class in the basement of my elementary school, every student gets a tray of 6 cakes of tempera paint and an old paintbrush. There are yogurt containers full of water at each space. The art room has long wooden tables, splattered with color and burnished by years of tiny forearms grazing their rounded edges. Every week, for 7 years, I returned to this room, growing not into an accomplished painter, but into a child who feels comfortable making a mark that belongs only to her. I'm 12 years old. It's a sunny day, early June. Half of my class is waiting behind me, single file, the low brush of the barrens around Chebucto Head enclosing either side of the path. The others have already made it over the crevasse. Everyone is waiting for me. Looking down, my knees buckle. The ocean sloshes white and frothy against the endless granite cliffs. Wally, our guide, reaches his hand across to me. On his face is an expression that cuts through my fear. Stern, but encouraging. Belief. I take his hand and leap. I'm 13 years old. It is the end of February. My rec basketball team has made it to the provincials in our division. One of the mothers from the other team offers orange slices to our side at halftime, even though we aren't her kids. I miss an important shot in the semifinal, but make a few baskets to help us come back after a tough first half in the championship game. We finish the tournament in second place. We get t-shirts with our names on the back, listed under our team. I feel the mixed emotions of defeat and pride. My father talks me through it on our drive home through the snow. I'm 15 years old. It is opening night for Queen Elizabeth High School's production of My Fair Lady. The seniors have cut out paper stars for the doors of the dressing rooms, normally occupied by the football team but borrowed for the musical these 2 weekends of the year. On each star, they have written the name of a cast member, no matter how small the role. On the back, a personal note, a record that our elders had witnessed us. Nancy Marshall, the director, gathers the 50-some-odd of us in an oblong circle, tracing the edges of the cinder block walls. Beaming with pride and excitement, she says, "Repeat after me. I believe. I believe that imagination is stronger than knowledge, that myth is more potent than history, that dreams are more powerful than facts, that hope always triumphs over experience, that laughter is the only cure for grief, and I believe that love is stronger than death." For nearly 20 years, Nancy was paid a modest stipend by a grant through the Artists in the Schools program, which this bill eliminates. Our basketball tournament was funded in part by a sport hosting program grant through the department now known as Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage. Wally Campbell's outdoor education sessions were made possible by discretionary funding grants from the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, and my dedicated art environment, long protected by HRM's supplementary funding program, has also been lost to time, when rather than establish dedicated art instruction for all children in public schools, the city and the school board made art teachers into traveling consultants rather than hosts of a sacred space. The cost of living is making our lives into grist for the mill. Spaces where we and our children can be truly free, that is, relaxed, curious, and uncalculating, disappear with every additional minute that we must devote to getting paid. Every year, there are fewer places where we can take meaningful risks and still recover. With the highest rents in the country and the lowest wages, provincial grants to the arts, culture, communities, education, recreation, and more are needed now more than ever. The value of these grants exceeds their cost to the province by orders of magnitude that are indescribable. By fostering environments where the soul has a fighting chance, they protect us from the cruelty of a society structured around protecting opportunities for profit at the expense of all else. If we allow these last bulwarks against freedoms to be lifted and taken away, we will inherit the consequences in the form of a meaner, more divided, and less capable community. The erosion of our humanity by means of this myopic focus on profit is not a metaphor, it is happening in real time. Lack of consideration for our place in the whole of things, living our lives as disconnected, atomized individuals and families, belonging to nothing greater than ourselves. All of these make us frightened and defensive. Living this way, our hearts close to each other. I don't want this for us. I don't think you do either.
We're going to
I think you believe.
Cut you off there, but we'll have questions here, and you might be able to finish your comments during questioning. Questions from MLAs? MLA Gender.
Do you want to finish up?
I tried to carry the goodness that's been given to me into the future, and I hope that you all will as well. Thank you.
Some questions? MLA Wozni.
For lay people watching at home who are not accustomed to navigating, complex budget documents that look like reams of paper, first, thank you for your presentation and for sharing the story of how the person that you are today was shaped by all of the experiences that you identified. Smaller dollar value investments over a lifetime have helped you become a vibrant, amazing person in the here and now. Thank you for reminding us of the little things matter in the long run. I'm wondering if you can talk about the human impact. This budget, it looks like a bunch of numbers on a page. It's just about money. But I'm wondering if you can talk about the human impact of a budget that can tell us how much is being cut to the dollar, to tell us the cost of all the things that are being removed, but can't express in any meaningful way the value of what is being lost through these cuts. What does that do to real people whose hopes and sort of the good stuff in life is tied up in what's being lost because of these cuts?
MLA Woz, could you frame your question just around FMA before I pass it over?
Yeah, the FMA enables a budget that allows revenues to be evaporated and taxes to be increased and is tied up inexorably with the cuts that are happening. So through that lens, I'll just leave that question with you.
Yeah, I think
Mrs. Johnston, go ahead.
Thank you. I think that the powers in this bill and the budget that is contained within it are akin to an approach to our cultural ecosystem and our society that is not unlike strip mining. And what strip mining does to an environment is removes what is short-term profitable and destroys the ecosystem that's left behind. And any responsible steward of land, whether that's a woodlot owner or someone who has a hunting cabin deep in the wilderness, untouched by human industry, knows that when you take something out of the ecosystem, even a small something, what is left can take a long time to recover. And in the interim, you can get takeover of undesired things and the beautiful things that make those places worth visiting, worth inhabiting, start to disappear. And sometimes when we take important things out of the ecosystem, those ecosystems ultimately become unlivable. Think about, places where invasive species have taken over, in lakes that have become eutrophied. When you remove one piece of the ecosystem, it's not always possible for it to rebound. And I think that metaphor serves us well in these discussions. That these changes may seem small, but they're not tested, and I'm not sure that the risk of losing this complexity is worth the short-term satisfaction that it may provide those who are looking for ways to reduce our budgetary impact.
Thank you very much. Yeah, real quickly, MLA Odit.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. You brought back some memories. We did South Pacific Guys and Dolls and Brigadoon when I was at QEH. So great fun. I was not the star.
The 1950s were a great time.
Yeah, the 70s there, sorry. So you mentioned, pardon me? A long time ago. I was there 77 to 80. And I did graduate on time. You touched on, I was on City Council for a long time, and you mentioned the supplemental funding. Arts, music, and librarians is what used to be covered by it, and I think they're looking at hopefully reinstating librarians. So you made some comments about that funding, though, that indicated that it changed arts and music. Can you just clarify that for me?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I made those comments to reference a larger cultural trend that the province also participates in, away from ensuring that our cultural institutions and schools are rich and expanding as opposed to shrinking. I believe the supplementary funding in the city is sort of the last relic of a desire among what used to be elected school boards, but are now no longer elected, to provide young children with opportunities to grow in spaces that are consistent. The province has the opportunity to expand those spaces to the rest of students outside of HRM, but at this point, to my knowledge, has not elected to do so. And I simply mentioned it as part of this whole because it strikes me that it shares the same impulse as many of the measures in this bill.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you coming in. We're still having trouble getting a hold of Mr. Boucher, so we're going to continue on. The next witness will be Megan Hansford. Is Megan here? Okay, we are a little bit early for Megan. Would Ty Lopi be here? No? Oh, go ahead. Come on up. Good morning. Please introduce yourself, indicate any organization which you may be representing, and we'll have 5 minutes for a statement and questions from MLAs. Go ahead.
My name is Ty Lopi. I am the Young Worker VP for CUPE Nova Scotia, and I am a PCW in long-term care.
Great. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. On behalf of CUPE Nova Scotia, I thank the committee for this opportunity to provide a submission on Bill 198. The Financial Measures Act 2026. CUPE represents 23,000 workers in healthcare, education, social services, and many sectors where CUPE members provide frontline public services. This government has omnibus legislation to bundle unrelated changes into one bill, and such is the case with Bill 198. This approach makes it harder for legislators and the public to fully understand the impacts of all changes proposed and to debate each change properly. We recommend that the government stop this practice and behave more democratically. CUPE Nova Scotia provides committee members with the following 3 recommendations for Bill 198 as it moves to third reading. First, in Clause 109, there is a change to Public Service Superannuation Act to extend the term for reviews of the pension plan under the Act from within every 5 years to every 7 years. Our members in this pension plan support this change. Second, we recommend that Bill 198 be amended to include changes to the Public Procurement Act to severely restrict public-private partnerships. The Auditor General, in her September 2025 report on planning and acquiring nursing home beds, touched on many of these challenges that have a direct outcome on the provincial budget and public finances for Nova Scotians. CUPE Nova Scotia recommends that Bill 198 includes a clause that amends the Public Procurement Act so that all public-private partnership projects will require an independent evaluation and public reporting of value for taxpayers, that a public sector comparator is prepared for any P3 projects being considered, and that all documents required to verify the public is getting value for money is publicly available. Well-connected and influential corporate entities are routinely awarded lucrative and untendered contracts to provide private infrastructure financed by public dollars and then leased back to the province. For example, $2.7 billion in funding to Shanex. This is a shameful way to spend public dollars. It is, however, a great business model if you are able to convince the government to provide funding guarantees to your private business, but it is terrible public policy. We are shoveling billions of public dollars into corporate and private pockets and then claiming that the only response is to cut departmental and program funding. As the Auditor General notes, P3s and public funding of private nursing homes need to be subjected to rational and transparent financial analysis and rigor. If the government were to do that, we would not be in a place of cutting important services across the board, 3% cuts to departments. With the money we are wasting wasting on private corporate welfare, we could have increased department budgets and avoided the horrific cuts to arts, culture, and community programs. Third, we note that Bill 198 is missing any attention to contracts being signed by the government outside of the budget process. We recommend that the committee studies ways in which the $6.7 billion in additional appropriations outside the budgetary process over the past 5 years be brought back into the budget process. This is extremely important change that is needed to put our province in a healthy financial position. To solve the challenges in healthcare, education, and many other sectors like long-term care, where workers are leaving because they cannot survive on what they are paid. This government needs to commit more financial resources to recruit and retain workers in public services. The Premier has said that the budget and Bill 198 are a vision for long-run growth at the expense of short-term pain. The problem with the Premier's approach is that short-term, many workers and communities are going to be significantly hurt. And the other problem is, as John Maynard Keynes said 100 years ago, is that in the long run, we are all dead.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll now open the floor for 5 minutes of questioning from MLAs. MLA Wozni.
Thank you for your comments and your presentation on behalf of CUPE Nova Scotia. I'm wondering if you can elaborate on you've spoken about 3 specific parts of this act, but in behind this, a series of policy and priority decisions that are political in nature, that this government, rather than invest in publicly funded public services, really has banked on major corporations providing public services at a premium. How does the decision to work with corporate partners to deliver services that are at the heart of what's good for the public erode the ability of government to fund the priorities of Nova Scotians, like the arts, like sustainable public services?
Mrs. Lope.
I wasn't originally supposed to be speaking today, so I don't have the answers to a lot of questions.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? The will of the committee, I do have one. Your first if you don't mind, with the will of the committee, as chair, your first recommendation, you said your organization, I want to be clear, you say you support the extension from 5 to 7 years? Yes. You do. But you're not sure what the rationale for that support is? Okay, can you elaborate as much as you can, and then it's okay if you're not elaborate enough, but go ahead.
I believe that the rationale behind extending the years for review cut down on the cost that was going towards lawyers rather than to the people.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Seeing that, none, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you coming in. We have Wayne. Wayne has come back and gone 3 times. So while we got him, we're going to get him in here. So we'll go to Wayne virtually. Gone again?
No, I'm just cheering him on. I don't know, they haven't told me he's gone, so hopefully he's coming through. So he's back.
The air conditioner just turned on? Is that hot? It can't be that hot outside.
It's to bring your shower.
Oh, is there a shower up there? Apparently, Wayne will not be joining us, so we're going to move on. Is Megan here? Oh, come on to the front, please. Good morning. Thank you very much for coming in. We appreciate you coming a bit early as well. We get a little bit ahead here because we had a witness drop out on us. Could you please introduce yourself, state the organization you may or may not be representing, if any, and then we'll have 5 minutes of a statement and then open up the floor to questions from MLAs. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. My name is Dr. Megan Hansford. I am here today representing myself, but I also work with ADSM for Women and Children.
Great. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
I stand here today, or sit here today, as a Nova Scotian. I live in Cole Harbour. I work, raise my family, and build community across Dartmouth and Halifax. I'm here as a mother, as a woman, as someone whose work is rooted in supporting women, gender-diverse individuals, and families experiencing homelessness. I also stand here today before you as a PhD whose expertise is in family violence intervention and prevention, and as a member of the Minister's Table on Gender-Based Violence. I'm here today because I'm deeply concerned about Bill 198. Concerned not only about the substance of the cuts, but also about the process, about the pace, and about what it signals to Nova Scotians, particularly those who are most vulnerable. Because at the moment, when there has been significant public engagement, when Nova Scotians have shown up, spoken out, demanded to be heard, it is disheartening that the Premier is not even present today to hear directly from people most impacted. The absence matters. It reflects this government's priorities. There's a phrase I often use to ground myself in my work when it comes to both crisis and strategic planning. When times are urgent, we must slow down. This is a phrase taken from Nigerian poet and scholar Bayo Akinmolafe. In moments of pressure, systems, like individuals, tend to react quickly, to default to short-term fixes, to prioritize immediacy over sustainability. But we know, both from lived experience and evidence, that systems cannot function, let alone flourish, in a constant state of crisis. And yet, that is exactly the state we risk deepening through the decisions embedded throughout Bill 198. Policy decisions of this scale, particularly those affecting public safety, justice, family well-being, and the roots of our culture, require thoughtful scrutiny, transparent debate, and meaningful consultation. That's not what we are seeing here. Through the Minister's Table on Gender-Based Violence, we have been engaged to have critical cross-sector work to strengthen Nova Scotia's response to intimate partner violence. This includes improving emergency protection orders, ensuring that they function as effective, immediate safety tools for survivors and children. These are not abstract policy discussions. They are life and death interventions. And yet, at the very same time, this government is proposing cuts to specialized domestic violence courts. That's not alignment, that's contradiction. Specialized courts are not optional enhancements within the justice system. They are evidence-based infrastructure. They improve survivor safety. They increase offender accountability. They reduce re-traumatization, and they ensure that complex dynamics like coercive control are properly understood and addressed. Protective orders cannot function in isolation. They require a justice system that is designed to interpret, to enforce, to respond to them effectively. Dismantling that infrastructure undermines the very safety mechanisms that we are working to strengthen. This proposed cut stands in tension with the recommendations of the Mass Casualty Commission and the declaration from this very government that intimate partner violence is an epidemic in this province. That commission called for a stronger coordination, deeper investment, and sustained systemic responses to gender-based violence, and the government has said it will deliver a society-wide response. Yet, at the first turn, we are seeing less. Scaling back specialized courts moves us in the opposite direction of these recommendations and away from the commitments made to Nova Scotians. This is not happening in isolation. We are also seeing proposed reductions to essential family supports, programs like Parenting Journey and Early Childhood Intervention Services. These are not supplementary services, they're foundational. Family SOS and other similar programs run through various organizations have provided trauma-informed, relationship-based supports to families navigating violence, poverty, and systemic barriers. They are already over capacity. They are already filling the gaps. Reducing these supports will not eliminate need. It will intensify it. The results will be predictable. More families in crisis, more children apprehended, more strain on child welfare, healthcare, and the justice system, and ultimately, higher long-term costs. Evidence is clear. Investments in prevention and early intervention save money.
You have about a minute left.
Cuts do not. They simply shift costs downstream. These conversations matter. And I will end where I begin. When times are urgent, we must slow down. We understand the first part of the sentence all too well. The times feel increasingly urgent. However, I am urging you not to fall to default in reactive responses. They no longer service us. Please have the courage to slow down, to create space for meaningful consultation, to listen, to fully understand the impacts and decisions of this magnitude. Slow down to have the courage to imagine something different, because these are not abstract policy choices. They are decisions that will shape the culture, safety, stability, and well-being of Nova Scotian families now and for generations to come. Please choose a path that strengthens rather than weakens the systems that Nova Scotians rely on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. There was a lot in there that was not connected to Bill 198, so I'll ask MLAs to try to frame the question around the Financial Measures Act. MLA Wozni.
My Ukrainian grandmother, who maybe had a grade 6 education, had a saying that when a little something like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And there was a lot of wisdom in that simple saying. I'm wondering, you indicated in your self-introduction that you sit on the minister's table. Presumably to provide counsel about policy direction and funding decisions to address the epidemic of gender-based and intimate partner violence in Nova Scotia through a whole-of-government approach. I'm wondering, given your position structurally on the minister's table, given that the Financial Measures Act contains a number of tax and revenue changes that impact government's ability to spend and fund programs like those you've outlined in your remarks, was the minister's table ever consulted on the potential for reductions in funding made necessary by the changes in the Financial Measures Act before these decisions were tabled in the House?
No. Thank you, MLA Wozni. Mrs. Hansford?
No.
Okay. Any further questions? MLA Wozni.
I won't ask you to speak for other members of the minister's table, but we hear from the minister in the House that, the advice received through the minister's table is central to the planning and decision-making by senior members of cabinet and informs a whole-of-government approach. I'm wondering if you can comment on how it reflects on a government that ignores an expert panel assembled to advise on best practices on a whole-of-government approach to addressing gender-based and intimate partner violence.
It's not really in order, but I'll allow it. Go ahead.
Thank you. At a recent table, we had the benefit of having a lot of ministers come and chat and express their experiences and their commitment to this process and moving it forward and having transparent discussions and working together. And yet, here we are today looking and facing these cuts. And it is all built on trust, and we're relying on trust in a cross-government approach. And trust is what is shared to shape decisions. And trust that historical commitments made across departments and from the minister himself will translate into action. And when these commitments are not reflected in legislation or in budget decisions, that trust begins to erode. And we are at the very beginning of this process with a long history of gender-based violence and inaction from the government. And I think it's imperative right now that when they speak, that the actions follow, because the words don't mean anything at this point in time.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you coming in. Our next witness is not scheduled till 10:30, so I'm suggesting we take a 5-minute break if possible. Is that acceptable to the committee? Okay, we'll try to reconvene at 10:21. Thank you.
So this person in the waiting room. Mr. Boucher.
Order. I'll call the meeting back to order. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity for a quick break. Our next witness is Gabrielle Terrian. Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Could you please identify yourself, indicate any organization you're representing, if any, and then we'll have 5 minutes for a statement and followed by 5 minutes for questions from MLAs. Go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. Hi, my name is Gabrielle Terrian. I'm just representing myself today, but I do work for Neptune Theatre, and I'm an independent artist. And I'll talk a little bit about myself and then what I would like to say.
Go ahead, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. So thank you for having me. I do appreciate the time to speak. I think this is maybe the first time I've spoken today, so my voice is a little scratchy. My name is Gabrielle Terrian. I am here today as a concerned constituent working and living in Halifax. I live in the North End, and I work as a box office agent and an independent theatre teacher who also teaches for Neptune's Theatre School. I'm also a theater, film, TV actor, a playwright, and a commercial voiceover actress. I've got a lot of jobs, but all of which are centralized in Nova Scotia. So I'm going to begin by speaking on Clause 64, the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission Act in Bill 198, the Financial Measures Act. I'll start with what I believe to be like a very simple question. I just want to know who directly benefits from the dissolution of the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission, and what will the economic impact be for Nova Scotians? The province of Nova Scotia is absorbing the debt from this commission upon its dissolution in Clause 64. This is a result of the hasty removal of the tolls from the bridge as what I believe to be an attempt to gain public favor, not an attempt to help Nova Scotians. I have concerns that the loss of revenue from this dissolution will not be felt by those making these decisions as much as it will be felt in our communities, in city and in rural communities like the one I come from. I come from Shubenacadie, though I live in Halifax now. Let me find my place. And it'll be felt by folks just trying to get by, which is something that is increasingly harder to do in this province. I'm concerned that the dissolution will increase the provincial deficit in a way that is completely avoidable. To paint a picture for you as to why I am personally affected and why I feel this loss of revenue will be felt in our communities as a result of excessive spending and the cutting of points of revenue from the bridge, there are now budget cuts being made to programs like Artists and Communities program provided by Arts NS, a program that in past has provided funding to the Dalhousie Art Gallery, which I'm sure many of you have gone to, and the Nocturne Art at Night Festival. So why are we not investing in Nova Scotia when it is now on the world stage as a place people want to come to? And programs like Artists and Communities, the Arts NS grants at large, Artists in Schools, and the program Artists in Schools are economic drivers in Nova Scotia. When we invest in Nova Scotians, they give back in huge ways, including in that they stay in this province. Let me find my place. They stay in this province and they continue paying their taxes here. And they create the things that tourists are invested in and keep coming back for. Working for the box office at Neptune, I know just how much the arts matter in this province. I see it every day, and the people who come to the theater from far away, they come and they stay in our hotels, they eat at our restaurants, they spend money at our stores, and they share in our culture. The $36 million from the bridge tolls was helping us, not hurting us, and it could continue to. Like I tell my students, it's okay to make a mistake, it's okay to fail. That's how we learn. And the amount of $36 million alone would pay for the cuts that are happening in the arts and in culture, tourism, and heritage. Instead, this Instead, with this budget, myself and hundreds of others face a decision none of us want to think about. Do we stay and fight for our right to create in a place that doesn't want us, or do we leave? Taking with us artists who could be educating our youth and enriching our lives, like I spend so much of my time doing. I love my job. I'm really good at my job, and my job matters. I pay taxes in this province, and it is not trivial or something that we can put to the side until we figure everything else out. Everything's interconnected. How do we know ourselves but through art? And if you don't answer any of those questions directly, then please do answer this. What do you think Nova Scotians want out of their lives? So this is seemingly the only time us constituents who this will directly affect.
You have about a minute left.
Thank you. Who this will directly affect have to comment on the scope of issues surrounding Bill 198. The bill looks like it's built to be confusing, and it's overreaching in a lot of ways. And I think Nova Scotians everywhere want clear, truthful answers. I'll end by asking you something and telling you something. First, very broadly, and it's so broad, who does this bill in these clauses benefit? And secondly, I want to share with you my own personal mantra. In life, we must survive, but we must also learn to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll open up the floor for questions from MLAs. MLA Wozni.
Thanks for your presentation and sort of your remarks that kind of help capture the impact of enabling measures in the Financial Measures Act that sort of show up in the budget. I'm wondering, given your leadership role connected to the Cultural Federation of Nova Scotia, Neptune Theatre, whether or not, to your knowledge, was there any engagement from government leadership in communities, culture, tourism, and heritage to engage with folks to look at alternatives? So if support for the sector for a window of time, it would be very difficult for the government to continue to provide grant funding. Was there any consultation perhaps about tax incentives for folks in the sector that might offset the loss of grants and to be able to recoup some of that money or some of that support through sort of income tax or other tax incentives for the sector, at least in an attempt to minimize any pain that the sector might experience at a time the province is experiencing fiscal challenges?
Mrs. Therrien.
Thank you. Now, no one's talked to me, so I don't know for sure. But I will say no one talked to me about cutting the grants for Arts on Us to grants to individuals, grants to organizations, which I wrote a ginormous grant for just last week. And it might be for nothing that I did all that work. So to answer your question, I don't know. But I do know that it feels like an overreach. The cuts. Yeah.
Any other questions? MLA Wozni.
I very much take to heart, your comments that affirm the significance and importance and sort of the overall health of the sector. That this funding, while it appears to be sort of temporary or discretionary, given the year-to-year nature of it structurally, but given your relationships throughout the sector, do you perceive there to be complete resistance to anything but support for the sector through grant funding? Or is there a willingness in the sector to innovate other ways of generating fiscal support outside of grants, perhaps through tax measures that might incentivize people to remain and continue to deliver services and programs?
Mrs. Therrien.
I'll be honest, I don't know. I suppose if you don't just work in theater, if you don't just work in arts education, there's still incentive for film and television and radio, which is something that I also do. Lots of artists have lots of hands and lots of pots. But yeah, I don't know for sure. I know that the people who do art like this for a living, it matters a lot, and we notice when we're not valued. And I think it's unfortunate, but we don't feel heard, I think, in a lot of ways. So I think if the government did go directly to organizations like Arts NS, like Neptune, like all of the theaters and all of the places in Nova Scotia, and say like, hey, what can we do? What can we do to work together to make sure that we're not just crushing an industry, because it does feel a little bit like we're bugs under big shoes.
Great. Thank you very much for coming in. We appreciate it. Looking forward to hearing you on the radio and seeing you on TV. We'll move on to our next witness, and this one is virtual, and they are here. It is Kate Phillips. Good morning. Can you hear me? So we can't hear you. Can you try to unmute?
It's unmuted there. There we go. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, we can hear you now. That's great. So could you please introduce yourself, indicate any organization, if any, that you're representing, and then we'll open up the floor for 5 minutes of a statement and then questions from MLAs. So go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Kate Phillips. I'm a business owner of the design agency Aerial Creative. I'm also a sole proprietor as a professional illustrator. I also represent my spouse today, who is a research coordinator focused on education and well-being and policy and aging. And I also speak today as a member of other groups, so my home in Cape Breton, a number of arts organizations across Nova Scotia, and also as a constituent of Dartmouth South over the last 10 years.
Great. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Originally, I had planned a lot of evidence regarding clauses 62, 63, 64, but after watching these bill committee presentations, I think it's really clear that I'm not the only one frustrated. The bridge tolls, 86 million yearly in revenue, gone, 300 million additional in debt. That was the fastest construction bid I think we've ever seen in Nova Scotia. And Nova Scotians didn't have a chance to react or ask questions about the construction company, connections, or consequences. The casino deed tax exemption, more money being thrown away. But I think what's worse, the invitation for big businesses to pressure our government for the same treatment. This is a very dangerous precedent to set. Are the deed tax laws for sale, I guess, to the highest bidder? It feels like Bill 198 is a wild mix of personal interests as opposed to a cohesive plan for Nova Scotia's future. So I'm being told that these choices give us a fraction of financial relief. But these decisions, along with the previous 1% HST reduction, obviously are benefiting the most wealthy and friends of the government first, as opposed to the people who need it the most. So I own a small business, but I don't get any tax exemptions. My grocery bills are not impacted by 1% tax off. And for those of us who are wealthy enough to own a vehicle, gas, tires, oil change, maintenance, insurance, these are significant costs associated with having a car, but the bridge tolls in comparison are nothing. So now, unsurprisingly, Nova Scotia here is in debt. We are choosing to throw away some really easy income. Slashing services will make the revenue gain harder in the long run. It makes people unhappy, which makes them less productive and more likely to move away. Cutting education makes people less educated, which means that they will make and spend less money, and the government will make less tax. So even if you don't really care about arts and public well-being, I think these are bad long-term financial decisions. We can't just keep shrinking every year. I'm not excited about the future that we are building for our next generation. And it is affecting all of us. We need to support the people who will be supporting us. Plus, shrinking these expenses might seem like a good short-term solution, but some of these expenses that are being chopped are actually revenue. So I'm a person who works full-time in the creative industry, and I am now dealing with the consequences of this budget mismanagement. I want to speak less romantically for a moment. There's this idea that the success of artists and musicians are due to some sort of inherent talent or divine spark of inspiration, something that only a few people have. But this is a myth. This is a sector that I trained to be in, like any other tradesperson or professional. I have a degree and experience cultivated slowly over a lifetime of work. It is not a hobby. It is my income that pays my bills and goes back into my community. We are a large industry of professionals working in the private sector, public sector, for education, tourism, music, food, entertainment. And it's good business. Arts and entertainment are the renewable resource that every single human imports, from books to movies, right into your TVs and phones. So even as the industry is changing rapidly, especially with AI influences, there is one thing that is certain, that the thirst for human creativity is growing. So I've never personally received a grant, but my clients often do, mostly publishers and researchers. One small grant goes a lot further than you would expect. It allows them to hire industry professionals like myself for projects that I work on with other illustrators, designers, authors, educators. And then this gets sent to a print shop, distributor, reseller, conferences, stores, and schools. I purchase my business supplies, I pay my taxes, I run my business alongside. Thanks. This is a wide web of commerce. So I volunteer my skills and visit classrooms with hoping that my skills and enthusiasms will be passed on to students so that they may also pick up a pencil or instrument. And let's be clear, these classrooms are desperately underfunded and understaffed and underorganized. It's a complete shock if you've gone and visited one recently, and you should if you haven't. These are people who are burdened with our province's poor revenue management. So now I have clients that are holding off on my contracts because they're unsure of their budgets for the year. My wife is a researcher, but her job also relies on grants, and this government is making them more competitive. So I first took out my first mortgage only months ago, but I'm not sure what my future will look like, as well as 22,000 other jobs in this province, many coworkers, clients, and friends. I've worked in this field for 20 years, but I hear the words "get a real job" thrown around by our leaders. I know that everybody wants best for their constituents. We're living through unprecedented times, and I'm beginning to realize that maybe we always will be. Everyone in this room wants a strong, healthy Nova Scotia for the unprecedented times to come. So I don't think it's unreasonable for us to ask you as Nova Scotians to slow down, rethink this budget, and maybe work together, find a smarter, more efficient path that leads to better long-term results for every Nova Scotian. So I'm kindly asking every member to kind of forget their party colors for a moment and think about a brighter future.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll now open the floor for questions from MLAs. We have no questions, so thank you very much for coming in today. We appreciate you, and we also appreciate you coming in virtually as well. Have a great day. Moving on to our next witness, Terry Lee Bulger. Is Terry Lee here? Come on up. Yep, come on up. We have a page right here that we'll hand them out for you. Yep, have a seat there. Take a minute to get yourself settled.
Good, buddy. How are you? Good, man.
Good morning, Mrs. Bulger. We'll have you introduce yourself and indicate any organization that you are representing, if any. And then we'll have 5 minutes for a statement, followed by 5 minutes of questions from MLAs. And we know you just arrived because we're a bit early, so we appreciate you jumping on with almost no notice. Just to go through the ground rules a bit, like we are talking about Bill 198, the Financial Measures Act. So please, confine your comments to around Bill 198. We do have some flexibility, and then the MLAs will do as well. So you have go ahead and introduce yourself.
Can I just wait a second? My colleagues are coming. They were going to meet me here,
If you want to wait a couple seconds, we can.
Yeah.
We're a bit early. Okay, so we'll just take let's say a 3-minute recess till our colleagues get in.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if you're willing to go forward, introduce yourself and indicate the organization, and then we'll give you 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I'm Terry Lee Bulger, and I'm with the Atlantic Publishers Marketing Association, and I represent the Nova Scotia Book Publishers Committee, which is part of the association.
Okay, go ahead.
And
5
I'm
minutes.
also, I'm the co-owner of Nimbus Publishing here in Halifax.
Fantastic. Go ahead.
Okay, so 10 days ago, I watched the second reading of the vote of the Financial Measures Act. It was so painful watching politicians vote on our livelihood that way. It's heartbreaking, and it really did feel like real-life Hunger Games. So I think you all know the Hunger Games. It was a book, originally. It was a book that became a worldwide phenomenon that dominated bestseller lists and eventually became a hit movie series. But Hunger Games wasn't a Nova Scotia book. It was published by a giant multinational publisher, the kind your Nova Scotia publishers have to compete against in every way, and no way does it embody our culture. However, Nova Scotia publishers have been here telling our stories for centuries. The first Canadian published bestsellers was published in Halifax in 1836. It was the beginning of a long tradition of storytelling that has shaped the province's culture. The current industry has existed in this province since the 1970s. Our books sell about $5 million a year, and these sales result in an additional $10 million of retail sales. We publish 170 new books a year, 2/3 of them by local Nova Scotian authors. And from creators to freelancers and employees, 730 people directly benefit from this industry. That's a great return on a $700,000 Nova Scotia investment in the Publishers Assistance Fund. Nova Scotia's cultural heritage started with books, and our books travel across the world, whether it's through nurturing new artists like Hans Christian Andersen, award-winning illustrator Sydney Smith, or publishing authors like Leslie Crew, a Cape Breton author whose books have sold close to 300,000 copies all over the world. Despite these successes, due to economies of scale, publishers in Canada need investment from their provinces to be sustainable and competitive. Sadly, we don't set book prices. The market and those multinational publishers I mentioned dictate the prices. This is what makes publishing in Canada so difficult. The market here is tiny, and we are competing with every English-speaking publisher in the world for shelf space as retailers. In your handout, I've included a comparison of what that looks like, and it gives a clear illustration of the real effects of these economies of scale. Since the pandemic, our production costs have doubled. Freight costs are through the roof. We have huge fixed overhead costs with warehousing and staff expenses. And to top it off, books are returnable. So if they don't sell quickly enough, then bookstores return them for credit. And more recently, revenues from south of the border have dropped by a whopping 80%. Film producers get tax credits. Digital media companies get tax credits, and other producers get tax credits, but there's nothing in the Revenue Act, which is what I'm speaking about today, to invest in the production of books. But what film producers and digital media companies do is not too different from what we do. We, too, spend years on creative projects that may or may not earn out. We produce accessible digital books and audiobooks, not just print on paper. However, unlike them, we have the added expense of printing, shipping, and warehousing physical books. But first and foremost, books are the embodiment of our culture in a way that most of these other production companies aren't. And now, more than ever, we need to defend our own Nova Scotia culture, not defund it. The effects of eliminating funding for publishers and excluding publishers from tax credits will not be limited to publishers alone.
You have about a minute left.
Book publishing is part of a broader supply chain that includes local printers, distributors, booksellers, and a wide network of freelance editors, designers, and illustrators. Every other province in Canada invests in this important cultural industry, with most other provincial investment far exceeding what we have received through the Publishers Assistance Fund. It has been proven that cuts to the arts lead to a decline in cultural vibrancy, reduced job opportunities in creative sectors, diminished public access to artistic experiences, and over time can negatively impact community identity, tourism, and overall economic growth. We know that times are tough and that across the country governments are reducing costs, but this isn't the way to defend our province, and we are happy to work with the government to find a way to continue investment in publishing so that we can keep telling Nova Scotia stories and support economic growth and job creation.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll now open up the floor for MLAs. MLA Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. There's certainly a lot of interest today on publishing, and I want to ask a question with respect to Clause 64 and giving up that much revenue on the bridges that nobody asked for, and the inability for government to explain why some organizations are getting 100% cut while others are getting a 20% cut. I'm just wondering, since the budget has been brought forward in this bill, the FMA that foregoes revenue, if the government has been able to explain to the industry in any way why 100% of the funding is being removed, as opposed to some organizations getting 20% cuts or just a range of cuts.
I'm sorry you weren't here for the instructions. I have to indicate you. So, Mrs. Balcher, go ahead.
Yeah, so of course we weren't consulted, as you know, none of us were. But the thing I would like to kind of talk about is that there is checks and balances, for the creative sector within, their own government sort of framework. So, for example, excuse me, I got all choked up and now hard to speak. The Creative Nova Scotia Leadership Council is a body that consists of volunteers that their job is to advise the minister. It says right on this page, advise government on the development of cultural policy, assist with resource management as it relates to cultural development, the lead strategy development for cultural strategy. These are the jobs of the Creative Leadership Council, and they're at the disposal. And I know for a fact that they were not consulted. So, I understand not coming to publishers and saying, oh, we're going to kill your program. How do you feel about it? But, there was no consultation even within the framework. There's also something called the Status of the Artist Act, which is another, legislation that, is there for our sector. And, there's a number of ways that the government undertakings are, there to support us. The one that is most relevant for us is 7H clause, which is provide investment for artists, arts organizations, and artists associations. We're an arts organization, and that's what we're considered everywhere in the country. Providing investment is not project funding, which has been referred to as some sort of support for our sector, which is the Creative Industries Fund, which we do have access to. It's a small amount of money for projects. It's $50 for export. Has nothing to do with providing investment in the sector and our organization. So, Publishers Assistance Fund was that. If we were to do a tax credit or something like that, change the Revenue Act to get that would be investment. But I've highlighted this number of ways that within the Status of the Artist legislation have not been, government has not undertaken their own checks and balances that are there to in these situations.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? MLA Wozni.
Ms. Balcher, thank you for your presentation on behalf of the publishing industry in Nova Scotia. You presented a very compelling business case why investing in the publishing industry isn't just good for publishers and writers, but also why it's good for the province economically and the revenues it would generate to contribute in a broader way to government income to support programs and services for all Nova Scotians. I guess given your leadership role, I'm wondering if you can outline for the committee government efforts to entertain proposals from the industry about tax credits or fiscal incentives that would represent investment in the sector that would help generate additional revenue for the province, that would help sustain programs in a number of other government sectors through increased returns within the publishing sector.
Mrs. Balcher, you have 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Yes, so the tax credit system is one that's used for publishers in many jurisdictions, in many provinces across the country. Ontario, for example, has the book publishers tax credit. BC, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, I believe, the number of the provinces have a tax credit system, which is basically for every dollar that we would spend on production and marketing, then we would receive back, 30% or whatever the factor was. So that would help lead to economic development, of course, because then the more that we would be spending on producing jobs and making new books, then we would actually be able to do 30% more than what we're currently able to do, or even more than that, because we're going to be able to do a lot less with these cuts.
Thank you, Mrs. Bulger. We appreciate your time today. We'll move on to our next witness, who is Susan Barrett. Is Susan here? You all right?
Yep.
Good morning. Thank you very much for coming in. Could you please introduce yourself, indicate any organization you may be representing, if any, and then we'll open up the 5 minutes for a statement, and then followed up by questions from MLAs. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Susan Barrett. I am not here on behalf of any organization, but I am an educator, lifelong artist, dancer, writer, many other things. So you can see which side of the camp I'm going to fall on. But I'm actually here also because I want to be part of this democratic process and to speak to this bill, which I find, frankly, baffling, bizarre. And I decided to look up an act. What is an act? And it sent me to statutes. And statutes are a primary source of law and are enacted to promote the public good. So I'm looking for the public good being served by this bill. And it's hard. When I look at the clauses, many of them seem oddly specific and possibly punitive. And I have a question about what their purpose is, really, and how they're going to benefit myself and my fellow Nova Scotians. So, for example, Clause 52, ending community easements. This would potentially destroy land trusts and access to walking trails, and these protected areas and trails are already a community good. So it's unclear why ending easements has been proposed, unless it is to clear the way for mining or resource extraction. I have no idea. Again, taxes on private woodlots. We want to disincentivize people capturing carbon. I don't understand that. Taxing EV and hybrid vehicles. Again, there's a pattern, it seems to be, of penalizing private citizens who wish to be environmentally responsible. And meanwhile, the 1% sales tax reduction, I was happy to pay. I won't notice it. I don't make enough money for it to really be of any value to me. It was spread equitably across all Nova Scotians as opposed to targeting very specific people. I also echo, the dissolving of the Bridge Commission, Part 7. I don't understand how that is good when we're in a deficit to take on the debt of the Bridge Commission and the cost of replacing the McKay Bridge. So I'm going to, that loss of revenue just seems egregious given that many small nonprofits, museums, theater companies, community support programs have been cut at the same time. So I'm going to focus, I guess, the rest on the Crown Lands Act. I'm going to veer a little bit, but I'm looking at Clause 58 and also the Provincial Parks Act, Clause 106, which talk about towing vehicles off land. Again, oddly specific, and it seems targeted. They strike me as an odd detail to put into an act, unless there's a specific target. For example, the Mi'kmaq land protectors at Hunters Mountain. And as someone who's trying to respect my treaty responsibilities, the treaties of peace and friendship, which are upheld by law in this land, I value Mi'kmaq teachings, and they consider what is best for the next 7 generations before taking any action. I think governments could benefit from taking a leaf from that book. It's a worldview that understands that humans, animals, trees, earth, water are all connected and interdependent. And Western science has been lagging
You have about
behind.
a minute left.
Okay, but we've recently discovered that that is true, so I'll jump ahead a little bit. Trees support and talk to each other. This province is not a spreadsheet. The people on it in this province are not budget lines. And the financial ecosystem is part of the creative ecosystem. Education, environment, health, everything is connected. Tourism. So when we rip up some of these smaller parts, it is like ripping out the forest floor and tearing apart the web of the small fungus that connect the trees. And you leave big holes. And there are no ways to plug those. And once you've clear cut, it doesn't grow back. And that is going to be the same for our economy if all of these small organizations are lost.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Barrett. We'll now open the floor for questions from MLAs. MLA Wozni.
Thank you for your presentation, your comments on sort of the specific content of the Financial Measures Act, particularly your concern about taking on the structural debt by absorbing the Halifax Bridge Commission, and how that compounds the fiscally precarious situation the government is in terms of being able to borrow money to fund services. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, in a first voice way, the government in making some very cursory comments about the FMA seems to believe that removing tolls from bridges and metro provides some kind of substantial marked boost to residents in the area that will offset the economic impact of assuming the debt of the bridge. I'm wondering if you could talk about the day-to-day pressures that bridge tolls placed upon you as a resident of Metro, and how strongly you feel about bridge tolls as a factor that creates pressures for you in terms of affordability.
Mrs. Barrett.
Thank you. As I mentioned, I am not rich, but I have to have a car because I work in the valley. So I commute across the bridge very frequently. That $1.50 or whatever it was that I paid was not significant to me in terms of, my budget at all. I think, and I felt I was contributing to a public good because I was investing in this bridge that I'm going to continue to drive over. And I know that we have to maintain the bridge. I know, so it is much easier for me to find that small pocket change every time I go across or have a Mac pass than it is to then have a big cost thrown back to me in some other way, whether it's taxation, whether it's, I have no idea how that's going to be recouped. But I was happy to pay the toll. And, I don't find it is particularly faster going across the bridge. There's more cars now. So what did we gain? We had a giant, I'm sure it cost a lot to rip all that infrastructure down, too, and repave everything. So we paid a lot of money for, to my mind, not very much.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming in today. We appreciate your time. We'll go to our next witness, Angela Bowden. Yep.
I said there were lots of pictures for you.
Ready?
Before I start, I want to ask a question because in the room this week, I noticed people had pins on that said support the arts and stuff, and I know that I wasn't allowed to wear any clothing that said Black Lives Matter next door. But I was wondering if I could wear this shirt.
I'm comfortable with it. Is everybody comfortable with it? Yep.
I just didn't want to
Nope.
break the rule again.
No problem.
This shirt, by the way, was created by a local artist here, Tony Sanzon Paris. You might be familiar with her. She's very indigenous.
Are you ready? Settled? Okay. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming in today. I know we spent a lot of time here the last couple of days.
I sure
We
did.
appreciate the interest in what we're doing here. So you could please introduce yourself, indicate any organization you are representing, if any, and then we'll open up for 5 minutes of questions, followed by 5 minutes for a statement and 5 minutes of questions from MLAs. Go ahead.
My name is Angela Bowden, and before I begin, I want to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and that we are all treaty people. For me, that acknowledgement is also deeply personal. Through my family line, my fifth great-grandfather was Stephen Francis, a Mi'kmaq chief from Yarmouth. So when I acknowledge this land and my Indigenous brothers and sisters, I do so with deep respect, with an understanding that this province's histories are intertwined. I'm speaking on behalf of myself today and the impacts of this Financial Measures Act. You're right, you have seen me here for the last 3 weeks. And to start, I want to quote Rosemary Brown. Being a Black woman in this country means I have had to fight my way up every step. The good thing is there is nowheres to go but up. These words were spoken by Rosemary Brown in 1972 when she became the first Black woman elected into a provincial legislature in Canada. She championed gender, equity, racial justice, social welfare programs, and human rights legislation. Her courage reshaped Canadian political life, and her spirit reverberates in this room today. She fought so that voices like mine could stand in rooms like this and be heard, unless those are the very voices that some would prefer to silence. Good afternoon, Chair Armstrong. Is that your name? I was thinking all morning, don't say it wrong. And members, good morning, everyone in the gallery. My name is Angela Bowden. I'm an African Nova Scotian mother, daughter, granddaughter, great-granddaughter, author, poet, artist, and citizen of this province. For the past 3 weeks, I have been coming to the legislature, sitting in the gallery, watching, listening, doing my homework, trying to understand the Financial Measures Act and what it means for the people of this province. And I will be honest, trying to make sense of this bill has given me a headache. The citizens sitting in the gallery are not spectators in democracy. We are participants in it. The bill feels like the Cadbury secret. Everybody knows the product exists, but no one can explain the recipe. So when we ask for the ingredients, the answers become unclear. And it reminds me of a game my sisters and I used to play when we were little. My two older sisters would blindfold me and my younger sister, and they would mix random ingredients from the fridge in the cupboard, and we would have to guess what we were tasting. Except the difference, that was a game. This is public policy. And democracy should never ask its citizens to participate blindfolded. Many of us have taken our time to sit in the gallery. We have placed our bodies inside this colonial institution because we believe in a democratic process. We came to listen, we came to learn, we came to participate, but instead of feeling welcomed in that process, we often felt scrutinized, over-surveilled, over-policed, and made into a spectacle. At one point, my sister was asked to turn her Black Lives Matter clothing inside out in order to enter this building, our house. And I could not help but think, if as much time had been spent scrutinizing the Financial Measures Act as it was scrutinizing us, perhaps the bill might make more sense. We are told that removing 1% of the HST will lift people out of poverty, but for many families, that means about $10 saved for around every $1,000 spent. $10 does not lift a family out of poverty. What lifts families out of poverty is something else entirely. Equitable education, food security, accessible transportation, and meaningful opportunities to participate fully in the economy of the province that we helped build. I am not a politician. I am not an economist, but I am a mother who has managed a household budget for more than 3 decades. And when you are balanced in a household budget, you don't cut the essentials first. You look at where there is a surplus. You look for where spending is unnecessary. You tighten where it does the least harm, and you protect the things that keep the household functioning. Because when you're cutting the essentials, the whole structure begins to collapse. We have heard a great deal about what has been rolled back. We have not heard enough about what was never restored. For the African Nova Scotian communities, the question remains very simple. What was taken that was not returned? We keep hearing the phrase, when we had more, we did more. When we have more, we'll do more. But African Nova Scotians' history tells a different story. When we had the least, we did the most. We made $1 out of 15 cents, Tupac said. We built communities, institutions, families, and futures in a province that often denied us the very resources that we helped create. I have also heard members of this government speak to both the most vulnerable. But vulnerability is not an abstract concept. It lives in real bodies and in real lives. And in this province,
you have about a minute left.
One of the most likely to sit in the intersection of poverty, discrimination, and systemic barriers is the Black disabled woman. But when women in this province have long learned how to carry what systems refuse to hold, we have carried our families, communities, and sometimes the weight of the province itself. African Nova Scotians communities help build this province. We are the very foundation. Yet time and time again, we bear the burden of balancing the budget. It falls on the communities that built this province. African Nova Scotian communities have been, since the late 1700s, building farms, roads, ships, schools, institutions that helped shape this province. In my own history, my ancestor Celia Bowden fled enslavement in Virginia and made her way to Nova Scotia, Birchtown, June 4th, 1783. So it is difficult to accept a democracy that asks citizens to participate blindfold when we have always been fighting to be seen. The province already studied these inequities. The Black Report on Education documented systemic barriers faced by African Nova Scotian students and laid out recommendations for change. So when supports connected to that work are weakened, it raises an important question. Are we moving forward?
I'll stop you there.
Let me just finish my sentence. Are we moving forward or are we stepping backward? Policy does not just change systems, it changes lives, because when we come together as African Nova Scotian, Mi'kmaq communities, disabled communities, LGBTQ2S+ communities, or the arts community, we are all treaty people, and together we hold our government accountable. Our communities help build this province. We deserve to help shape its future, and democracy should never ask its citizens to participate blindfolded, because a healthy democracy does not fear its citizens seeing clearly or speaking freely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. I was going to say if sometimes the committee members would allow some of the question time to allow people to finish up, but that's fine. MLA Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and great presentation. I noticed you have a few books with you, and you said you were an author. I just want to give you an opportunity if you want to just speak to some of the pieces you have there and just to show the committee the importance of your work.
Thank you so much. And actually,
Mrs. Bowden, go ahead.
Yeah.
You think I would know this process by now?
until you do, and it's hard to get in the routine, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that opportunity, because actually in April of 2021, I was recognized on the floor, and in just March 5th of this year, I was recognized on your floor for both of these products, okay, which feels very contradictory in my body right now, and I'm shaking. I'm a little rapid today. So this book here, Unspoken Truth, Unmuted and Unfiltered, it highlights the experiences of people living in the diaspora. Stories I heard around my kitchen tables for decades were just swirling around, and they didn't have a home. So it birthed this book right here, because it's important that our stories remain for generations to understand. Plus, when we hit the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, people wondered, how did we get here? Well, we always knew how we got here, because there's never been a point where we weren't here. So this book helps people sort of get in touch with that information. This book here, Black Boy, is a book on cultural identity for Black boys living in the diaspora. My children, my two Black beautiful sons who are grown men now, grew up their whole lives seeking identity and trying to wonder who they were. They asked me questions that I didn't have the answers to. So what do I do as an author, as an artist? I stand in the gaps and I try to become a bridge, not the bridge that you took the tolls off of, but I tried to become a bridge that helps bridge those gaps. And artists is so important, right? I didn't have time to put into my presentation about the arts and the $66 million that you invested, but the things that you divested, like artists in the school. I don't know if I'm going to North Preston next at the end of the month to speak to these Black children and empower them. I don't know, because writers in the arts has been taken out of the budget too. There's so much I could talk about, but I have 5 minutes.
Any other questions? MLA Wozni.
The Financial Measures Act empowers the government to make changes to the tax regime in the province that either diminishes the revenues that it receives or augments them. There are a number of decisions in the Financial Measures Act that forego revenues that the province has been receiving for a significant period of time. And that's problematic because it justifies in government's mind the need to cut programs and services. I'm wondering if you can speak about, from an African Nova Scotian lens, what are the harms of cutting programs that were enabled from a fiscal perspective to address longstanding, generational, systemic harms experienced by African Nova Scotians in 52 historically black communities right across this province.
Well, oh, sorry.
Mrs. Bowden.
Well, I think the government already knows what it does because it accepted reports that speak about that, like the Black Report. So what I will say is it further creates that school-to-prison pipeline, and it diminishes the pipeline possibility for our students and our youth.
Any other questions from committee members? Mrs. Bowden, you've waited a long time. We'll give you maybe a minute to sum up here, okay?
I just want to say that before you're so eager to say, yes, 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 let's pass this budget, we win, right? Listen to the people. I'm going to cry. Listen to the people it affects the most, because these policies are living in our bodies. When you see individuals coming and sitting here, me and my sister, for the last 2 weeks, it's not because we want to cause you guys trouble. It's because we want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to be listened to. So back up. The Premier already admitted he made some mistakes that should have never been made, because when you consult with the experts first, you don't have to make those decisions that affect people's lives. They're not just numbers. They're not just words on a page. They are generations of our children's future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in today. We'll move into our next witness, Susan Jowdry, and Susan is coming in virtually. Jowdry. Good morning. Can you hear?
Good morning.
Oh, great. We
Yes,
can
I
hear,
can.
and we can hear you as well.
Excellent.
So if you could please introduce yourself, indicate any organization you are representing, if any, and then we'll have 5 minutes for a statement, and then we'll have questions from MLAs. So go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Susan Jowdry. I have had the privilege of teaching the Museum Studies course at St. Mary's University for the last 5 years, and I teach at other universities as well here in Halifax. And today I am representing myself.
Great. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Great. Nova Scotians have been shouting no for well over a year now, so it's past time that MLAs step up and represent their constituents by also shouting no. The current Premier loves to use the phrase, when the rubber hits the road. But if someone doesn't step hard on the brakes, he's going to drive us off the cliff. You can't make sense of the Financial Measures Act without considering previous sessions, the Premier's articulated goals for the province, and the proposed budget. Bill 198, read with the budget, doesn't really tell a story of austerity. They paint a picture of autocracy. Since the last election, the government has been consolidating power while subjugating Nova Scotians. For example, Bill 198 communicates the government's motives to consolidate power by penalizing woodlot owners whose land use doesn't align with the government's goals, running contrary to the Leahy report they promised to implement, that's the Forests Act, using conservation officers as policing power against the Mi'kmaq, that's the Crown Lands Act and the Provincial Parks Act, restricting public claims for compensation or damages, that's the Mineral Resources Act, and ignoring land designated for protection, which undermines the province's stated conservation goals, and that's the Conservation Easements Act. These are all land use and access amendments. In 2024, the government scrapped the Coastal Protection Act regulations. Last year, Bill 6 was passed, which repealed the Uranium Exploration and Mining Prohibition Act, legislation that was originally adopted to, quote, protect the health and safety of Nova Scotians and the quality of their environment, end quote. All these changes are intended to support the Premier's publicly stated objective, mining and fracking regardless of harm to Nova Scotians. The Finance Minister was right when he described Bill 198 as, quote, supporting the Conservatives' economic agenda, end quote. The agenda couldn't be clearer. Subjugate Nova Scotians, consolidate power, and force resource extraction, which will send money out of the province and leave Nova Scotians paying for subsequent cleanup. We're already paying to clean up after mining companies, and there are over 60 abandoned mine sites in the province. I know my history, and we've seen this before. The Financial Measures Act is part of a multi-pronged strategy. It's likely the current government concluded that an affinity for place makes it difficult to destroy the land and water that people rely on and love. So closing museums, cutting arts funding, limiting Nova Scotians' ability to share our stories seemed like a prudent course of action. When you cut heritage, culture, and the arts and declare an assault on the land, you discourage the development of Nova Scotian identities. This will unmoor people, and they will leave the province. Over half of our arts and culture organizations are rural. Investment in the sector is core funding. Typically, people live somewhere they feel connected to and see promises of a better quality of life, which is why Nova Scotia experienced a population bump early in the COVID pandemic when the province was handling the global emergency much better than most. In 2023, Premier Houston said, quote, "Doubling the population for me is about right-sizing our demographics. It's about making the province younger," end quote. If passed, the proposed Financial Measures Act and accompanying budget will have the opposite effect. They communicate a refusal to invest in quality of life and disproportionately target the Mi'kmaq, African Nova Scotians, youth, women, the LGBTQ2S+ community, people who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, seniors, students from early childhood to post-secondary, and people with disabilities and caregivers at a time when the province's disability rate has risen to almost 40% of the population. It's well known that people who can't access necessary supports and resources experience a lack of social cohesion. Nova Scotians will be forced to leave. And we're already facing decline. In December, Statistics Canada reported that Nova Scotia experienced the largest population decline in a decade. Nova Scotians said no to Bill 6. They're saying no to Bill 198 and the budget. At some point, MLAs must listen to their constituents and say no before it's too late, and we've lost an arts and heritage sector that directly and indirectly employs 22,000 Nova Scotians and contributes about $2 billion to our GDP. Before we've lost clean water to industrial mining operations, young Nova Scotians to better opportunities, and we lose more money cleaning up after negligent mining companies. Currently, core investments like heritage, arts, culture, education, social development, and mental health are being described as inefficient, while things like generative AI and exploiting the land are framed as financial sustainability. This is completely backwards. Nova Scotians are empowered and resilient when the government invests in our histories, our stories, our creative output, our land, and our lives. This government isn't operating as a democracy. It's creating an autocracy, but Nova Scotia is Canada's ocean playground, not Houston's private peninsula. The proposed budget cuts and amendments will affect everyone, even you, when you're no longer an MLA. You have the opportunity to hit the brakes and defend democracy by voting no on both Bill 198 and the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll now have questions from MLAs. MLA Hanson.
Thank you, Dr. Judry. I really appreciate your presentation today. It was very succinct, especially when we think about how large the bill is. In retrospect, 20 bills, 137 clauses. I mean, how much more can we confuse Nova Scotians by, asking someone to speak for 5 minutes about everything that means really nothing. So I appreciate your presentation today. Is there anything or any recommendations that you would have in particular that you would like to see done differently as someone who's kind of spoke to multiple pieces of the bill?
Dr. Jowdry.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people have been talking about consultation during this process. I watched lots of excellent speakers yesterday, and everyone was talking about not being consulted. And what I really would like to see moving forward, and hopefully we get to a point where we stop this budget process and really think about what we're doing with these omnibus bills and these budget cuts. But I really would like to see collaboration. And so when we think about our treaty obligations, I'm a settler. I grew up in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia. My father grew up in New Bern, Nova Scotia. And I am a settler, and I do have to uphold the treaties. And when we look at the way that, the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs commented that these cuts and parts of this bill really appear targeted, I think they're right. And so I think if we had more collaboration and a real, true nation-to-nation outlook on the province. I think that it would make a big difference to some of these land use amendments, but as well as some of these cuts that, directly impact who gets financed to be able to share their stories, how people can access their history. And that is really important to reconciliation.
Any further questions? Emily Mombercat. Emily Mombercat.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. You made a very excellent point around arts in rural Nova Scotia. Now, I come from Sydney myself, so it's not as rural, but there are rural, of course, there are rural parts of the community too as well. And my fear is that government looks at these smaller museums and these smaller in scale projects or programs, but they're not looking at how, to your point, how impactful they are in rural communities. The numbers, the visitations or the numbers won't be as high maybe as it would be in the larger urban centers, but they're so critical to the success, as you said, also telling the story of communities. So if you want to elaborate on that a little bit, the importance of art in rural Nova Scotia, I would really appreciate it.
Dr. Jadri.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's a great question. So Chris O'Neill spoke yesterday and did a really good job at connecting what arts establishments do, even for, day camps and youth. But beyond that, those museums in those rural areas and those arts communities, they're community gathering places. They are, again, I'll mention this again, a great spot for reconciliation work, especially since the museum sector has been so responsive to the TRC calls to action. And in those rural areas, they are job creation. People talk a lot about jobs, and definitely youth jobs, and so those student jobs and those summer jobs that exist in that sector, and especially in museums, but also in other parts of the sector too, in galleries and in other cultural institutions. They give students such a rich experience to build skills that they will use and transfer into whatever they do in the future. So it's extremely narrow-minded to be sometimes 100% cutting, sometimes 20%, because it really is going to affect mostly those rural areas, really impact them. And also to your point, you're right, it doesn't make sense to compare like the Museum of Natural History's number or the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic, where they have lots of traffic all year round. Simeon Perkins House, for example, which is one of our recent closed sites, just had renovations done. There are scholars currently working with that collection. And so I don't think anyone took the time to think about how these sites collect, preserve, and allow access to our history and allow rural areas to feel more connected province-wide. And so once you start cutting those, and it draws tourism there, right? So you don't have the Simeon Perkins House or the Astor Theatre. I'm kind of focusing on Liverpool because that's down my way, growing up in Bridgewater. But then you don't have people who want to move into those communities. You have people who have been working in the sector who are going to leave the province. So we need to think about Nova Scotia more than just HRM and think about the entire province when we're making these decisions.
Thank you, Dr. Jodry. The time for questions from MLAs has expired. We appreciate you coming in today. We're going to move on to our next presenter, Jacinta Armstrong. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for coming in. Please identify yourself, indicate any organization you may be representing, if any. Then we'll have 5 minutes for a statement and then followed up 5 minutes of questions from MLAs. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Hi, je m'appelle Jacinta Armstrong. My name's Jacinta Armstrong. I'm here as a citizen, an artist. I'm also here on behalf of SINS, sometimes in Nova Scotia Dance, and Suddenly Listen Music and Performance. And also, I won't list them because it would take too long, but I am also a worker for many, many, many other arts organizations because that's the nature of the ecology, as well as a number of cultural organizations relating to my Acadian identity. So, I'm here to speak. The anchor point is against the EV surcharges bill. I personally, my car is nearing the end of its life, and so I need to get a new car. I would have liked to get an EV or a hybrid. Also, I have an oil furnace, and I would also like to get a heat pump. And I'm really encouraged to get a heat pump. And I was thinking I would be really encouraged to get an EV or a hybrid. And so I'm a little bit confused why there is mixed messaging. So we have a new surcharge on the EVs that is, this is dissuading me to get an EV or a hybrid. And in the arts, it's the only one I have a line, structure drives behavior. So the structure of this surcharge is going to, as you know, drive my behaviors. Like, I don't have that much extra money. I need a heat pump. I need a car. I need to still go to work and everything else. And so as a citizen who cares about the environment, I find it... what's the word? I'm incredulous that there's an additional cost being put onto a vehicle that is going to be better for the environment. I would accept a different argument, perhaps, if it seemed more strategic, but it just seems like one of many in this bill that's kind of like punishing anyone who's trying to think ecologically. So, I'm the daughter of a doctor. And I'm a Nova Scotian. And when I was a teenager in high school, the government reduced the wages of doctors by 40%. And so exactly my dad says that he made more money in 1979 than in 1995, which is approximately when those cuts occurred. And this, in my opinion, is relevant for several reasons. So one thing is... those cuts that happen then, everybody here knows the effect that 30 years later, what effect the government cuts to doctors has made and the expense related with that now, the problem related to that now. So, I know directly from that any decision made now, any policy, any piece of structure, like you do, has a long-term effect. And I think that when it comes to the environment, we should be thinking about that. So another thing about my personal experience with my dad being a doctor, in the years when I was deciding how to move forward in my career, because of the behavior of the government...
You have about a minute left.
Okay, thank you. Cutting the doctor's wages, I was discouraged from becoming a doctor. So I was encouraged by my family to do something else. And I would be not the only one. So any part of this bill that is discouraging, I don't think we should be discouraging care for the environment. As a person, as a daughter of a doctor, as an artist, as an Acadian, these are not my values. And I wonder why they are yours.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll now open up for questions from MLAs. MLA Hanson.
Thank you, Ms. Armstrong, for that. I appreciate the forward thinking. I think about that when we talk about teachers, right? We want to have more teachers in our school system, and then yet we don't want to encourage folks or support them in programming or scholarships for more teachers or teaching professions. So I think, using the example of your father is a really good one for us to think about the impacts that this will make over the timeline. And I think as legislators, that is exactly what we're supposed to be doing, thinking forward, because we want to make sure that Nova Scotia is going to be thriving, is going to be successful. And a lot of these pieces in the FMA, the Financial Measures Act, really don't make a whole lot of there's no correlations or structures or timelines for any of the things that are being put forward. So my question to you is, what would you have liked to have seen been put forward in this particular bill, or changed from what you know about this bill?
Mrs. Armstrong.
I haven't internalized the structure. I would have appreciated something that would look at that would define the problem caused by electric vehicles, and that would propose a solution that bears in mind the identified problem, and also bears in mind Nova Scotia's ecological aspirations. So rather than a surcharge on consumers, perhaps something that would have maybe a usage calculation, or different, I know what I would have liked, a subsidy to consumers for purchasing electric vehicles or hybrids would be where I would go, actually. Maybe, I'll just add, it's like, why not a surcharge to non-EV and hybrid users? Okay.
All right. Any other questions? MLA Hanson.
Thank you for that. There was a subsidy previous. We don't know why it was removed as well, but that was by the Progressive Conservatives. But I want to ask another question. So you were talking about the environment and how important it is, because we do know that that's what's going to sustain us for time immemorial. We need to have our environment so that we can breathe, so we can do all those great things, walking the trails and such. I say this because there's also pieces in the Financial Measures Act that talk about forestry and talk about community easement, and how it doesn't seem to be benefiting the environment, and actually it seems like they may be a bit more harmful. It's what we've heard from other folks who have presented. I'm just wondering, are you familiar with those particular pieces as well, and what your thoughts are on that?
Mrs. Armstrong, 1 minute left. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Well, I am familiar with them, and again, I'll just speak to my roots as an Acadian. My family has stewarded their land as settlers, like many people in Nova Scotia, for hundreds of years, despite government interventions on the Acadians that weren't to their benefit. Even though that's what happened to the Acadian people, in my personal experience, the Acadian people have taken care of the land that they live on and the sea that they live on and near. And those are important to me as part of my lineage. So any of the parts of this bill that do not protect the land and people who care for the land for its well-being, I am opposed to.
Great. Thank you very much for your time. We'll now move on to our next presenter, who is Kev Corbett. Good morning. Thank you very much for coming in. Please identify yourself, indicate any organization you may be representing, if any. Following that, you'll have 5 minutes for a presentation, followed by questions from MLAs. Go ahead.
Super. My name is Kev Corbett, and I am here on my own to speak as one voice of cultural memory to the ears of you all, our province's future. As such, there's a bit of, speaking about cultural memory, there's a bit of preamble that just provides the context. So just bear with me. I'll get through it as quick as I can. I'm an 11th generation Nova Scotian via the Port-Royal community. I'm an 8th great-grandson of one of the founders of Beaubassin, which preceded Amherst. I'm a 4th great-grandson of the Honourable John Edward Corbett, member of the Legislative Council of Nova Scotia and chairman of the whole House. I'm a great-grandson of a Cape Breton coal miner. I'm a grandson of a Sydney steelworker named Ed Corbett, who was the first president upon ratification of Local 1064, the Steelworkers Union, which enabled steelworkers to own their own houses, educate their kids, was involved in the building of the Canso Causeway, as well as being a part of the Antigonish movement, which blended adult education, cooperatives, microfinance, and rural community development to help small resource-based communities around Canada's Maritimes improve their economic and social circumstances. I'm also a grandson of the Acadian community, which is imported in Amherst in their thousands from Capilé and surrounding communities as cheap labor to run the factories during Amherst's industrial period. Around that train station, now a pizzeria, sits the husks of the industrial era: Amherst Piano, Dominion Casket, where another great-granddad worked, Robb Engineering, Canada Car, and so on. And entire sections of that side of the tracks, which to this day remain fenced off due to the deep environmental pollution, with concomitant cancer and addiction rates living all around. I'm a son of a guy who, seeing the desolation at the Sydney Steel, as Sydney Steel was abandoned by its American owners, and the environmental devastation left in its wake in the form of the tar ponds, left. I turned into a musician. None of it would have happened without Bob Angel starting up Amherst High School band program. None of it. I sang in Jeannie Milner's choirs from grades 4 to 12. Let's note the Nova Scotia Choral Federation cuts. I poured myself into the band program, Amherst Musical Production Society Showcase Productions, and that was where I found myself. I found myself surrounded by kids who had gotten the short end of Amherst colonial stick and grown up near the Orange Hall, maybe grown up surrounded by addiction more than I did, some in fairly significant poverty, absent fathers, etc. Arts education gave me purpose. I'm not telling you any of this to talk about myself as much as to illustrate the point. Engaged professionals with a program take kids going through familial trauma, helping them find a place. It's a tale as old as time. But if you don't make a kid learn to read, they won't. The opportunity is gone. As I was nearing the end of university, Nova Scotia was screaming to the world about what a cultural powerhouse it was. I moved here to learn the city I'd been born in. I've been implicated in over a dozen East Coast and Nova Scotia Music Awards for my work with my clients. And I might be wrong, but I think I'm the only person voted Nova Scotian Musician of the Year twice. I was involved with the first full CD of original music from Amherst in 1993. That was Drimmin Downs' A Maritime Woman. I've since represented Nova Scotia on stage in 20 countries. I've been an instructor, clinician, festival site director, tour manager, conference organizer, sound tech, recorded for the CBC, the BBC, attended and was then hired by the Banff Centre for the Arts, played Canada Day on Parliament Hill twice, was drummer on a record that was finalist for Scottish Album of the Year, released 3 of my own records, toured them from St. John's to Tofino and back, sang my way across the country on the train, was accepted to the first round of the National Arts Centre's COVID concert series, been a peer assessor for the Canada Council for the Arts, been Canadian VP for AFM Local 1000, sat on boards and been published in 2 books. With the onset of the pandemic in my 50s, I turned into a scenic carpenter in the film industry here, and in the in-between the film contracts, I balanced carpentry and musical work currently for the Canadian Sea Turtle Centre, shout out, and ongoing musical clients. A lot has been said here about how we in the arts prove our economic worth again and again and again and again. So I'll not repeat those figures. I'm here to tell the members assembled that I am not particularly rural amongst Nova Scotians in knowing exactly what rural communities feel like when someone swoops in from away, strip mines it for all the good stuff, and then leaves.
You have about a minute left.
Thank you. In industrial Cape Breton, in Amherst, in Trenton, Shelburne, towns all around the Bay of Fundy and down the valley, we have seen this extractive movie before. I've been to the patch. I've seen the orphan wells. I've talked to members of Indigenous communities where they haven't seen a caribou in decades. Ontario has foregone stewardship of the Northern Boreal to make 2x4s we now can't sell to the States. Vague talks of jobs are one thing, but extraction companies do not have a good track record of living up to their commitments to communities, and this government, by moving the goalposts and charging forward without consultation in an omnibus form, is not showing good faith. The easements clause, where the government appears to be coming for your granddad's woodlot if you don't clear-cut it, is a nightmarish scenario for anyone who loves this place, who thought that was a good idea. The takeover of the Bridge Commission, which was not previously a problem, is creating chaos that ripples out into every nonprofit and community organization across the province. The clause that the minister is empowered to permit commercial activities in provincial parks without any other accountability safeguards. How can we be assured that parks will be protected against developments like the West Mabu Golf Course? The clause that claims to be about traffic safety, which is actually about removing Indigenous people from their land.
Thank you, Mr. Corbett. Your time is up, but sometimes MLAs will allow you to ask questions. So, MLA Mombriquette?
That's okay if you want. If you have
one last paragraph.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, members. The clause that claims to be about traffic safety, which is actually about removing Indigenous people from their land, where treaty supersedes provincial law, is not only mean-spirited and racist, but it's going to tie this government up in court challenges and continued conflict. That's not going to send a good message to investors. This should have been sorted with negotiation and inclusion, not omnibus ramming. When the Premier retires into a mining company board position, the remaining members of the party of government will be left to explain to Nova Scotians why they attack the best things about this place. I urge a total rework. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, MLA Mombriquette, for allowing him to finish. Any other questions? MLA Mombercat, go ahead.
Just more of a comment. You made a great point, and I'm from Sydney. My grandfather was Tom Mombercat. He was a union head at the steel plant. I had family in Sydney, in the pier, and the Novaks worked in the mine when they came over from Poland, my grandfather. So you struck a chord big time. Proud Cape Bretonner. I don't have a question, but you made a valid point about how Nova Scotia used to be a powerhouse when it came to the arts and the community and the promotion, and you're very right. Like, if you look over the years, we used to celebrate who we were to the world. And now we're in a situation where we're seeing our greatest storytellers losing their ability to do that, which is going to result in people leaving. And I thought that was an excellent presentation, man. And as a Cape Bretoner, your stories of how communities have been stripped, you're absolutely right. We've seen it with the plant. The company came in, the company left. There was the marches. There was the marches of concern. It was the same with the mines. And we needed, in a situation where a government talks about, economic opportunity, and you see all the posts on social media about all the excitement that they're trying to tell people with all these projects that are coming, they're actually taking the foundation of who we are and a big part of our economy and how we support families away. So I just want to say thank you. Good to see you.
Cheers, yeah. MLA Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for your presentation. I truly appreciate the history lesson, but as well, some of us need to know exactly what that means for our province and what the history means for our province and how we have been workers, how we've been, folks who have put our best foot forward and to represent Nova Scotia and to be proud of Nova Scotia. And so I appreciate you representing us as a Nova Scotian across the world. My question is, as you read the bill, and you've mentioned a number of pieces that were a part of that bill, what was your initial thought when you really took a look at some of the things that were in the bill? Does it ring prosperity? Does it ring this is a proud moment for Nova Scotia to say, hey, this is what we represent? I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are on that.
Mr. Corbett.
Thank you. To be very honest about it, like I sort of said, promises of we're familiar with promises being made about jobs, that thing, and the main thing that I thought, which was partly informed by visions of the Mounties coming in and removing Indigenous folks from Hunter's Mountain in Cape Breton, is how do you think this is going to go, right? The court challenges are going to come. They're going to keep on coming, right? Because they've been here 9,000 years. They're not going anywhere. It's still their land. We are still not good at paying the landlord. You know what I mean? We're not, in the entire pasty history of this country, we are not good at living up to our end of the deal. And continuing to kick people off their land and proceed without inclusion, it boggles the mind because it keeps on happening and happening and happening kind of thing. But then beyond that, it's not just the court challenges. It's the CBC footage of more, more footage of Wet'suwet'en type of stuff. Okay, here it is. It's going to keep on happening, and it doesn't need to be this way, folks. That was my main thought. Thanks for the question.
Maybe time for one more quick question if anybody has one. MLA Wilson.
Thank you so much. I learned so much. You truly are a subject matter expert in our Nova Scotia arts and culture. What, quickly, I'm sure we could talk more, what impact do you think these changes are going to have on not only just your career, but the arts and culture, short-term and long-term?
Mr. Corbett, 30 seconds. I'm in my 50s now, so I've kind of had my career in a way. I'm going to keep on working for the clients that I work for and stuff like that, but it's a different ball game than it was when I showed up here in my early 20s, right? The math is altogether different in terms of musicians being able to tour, musicians being able to sell things and stuff like that. So what's going to change for my life? I don't know. But what I'm thinking of is community's ability to sustain young minds into finding themselves, regardless of what the metaphor is. The metaphor doesn't need to be becoming a
a studio musician or something like that, right? If, for example, if the family court is still defunded, for example, I've been working multiple jobs. I don't know if that got walked back or what, but like, if the family court gets affected, if community organizations get affected, if community mental health services get affected, and stuff like that, like all of those things enable people to become fuller versions of themselves that, to turn into adults.
Thank you. The time for questions from MLAs has expired. We really appreciate you coming in today. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to our next presenter, Barbara Richmond.
So they asked me to bring 15 copies of my presentation.
If, there should be a page here. There he is. Thank you very much for coming. If you could introduce yourself, indicate any organization you are representing, if any, then you'll have 5 minutes for a statement, followed by questions from MLAs. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Barbara Richmond. I don't represent any organization anymore. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on Clause 1 of Bill 198. This plan attempts to improve fiscal stability by addressing a piecemeal set of measures designed to generate revenue or control expenditures. It does not show a comprehensive understanding of the more than 2,000 communities that this government serves. These communities, some large, some mid-size, and many very small, are the fabric of this province. Culture is one sector that the bill and the budget have not properly addressed. It encompasses our founding cultures, heritage, and the arts. Like health, education, and sport, culture is present in all Nova Scotian communities, from the very smallest to our major centers, touching every part of our province and all of your constituents. A Financial Measures Act and budget that do not include support for this sector are inadequate and short-sighted. These plans need to be revised and rewritten in consultation with those who work in the sector and know its requirements. Culture, arts, and heritage are not frills. They're deeply embedded in all of our communities. There are practicing and contributing artistic and heritage individuals in every one. In the sheds of woodworkers and blacksmiths, sewing rooms of quilters and rug hookers, church choirs, community bands, kids dancing in the street, bookmobiles, galleries, museums, theaters, movies, concerts, big-ticket events, fashion, festivals, and television. In villages with brightly painted houses and handsome churches, clever signage, stories told around a kitchen table, and community celebrations. Even the clothes you wear, the furnishings in your home, and the variety of vehicles you enjoy, be they skateboards or sailboats, are touched by art, design, and the evolution of culture. It's culture that makes us unique, recognizable, exciting, and strong. I've worked in the arts, culture, and heritage sectors as an executive manager and consultant for over 40 years. In that time, I've served more than 70 Nova Scotia organizations and cultural professionals from Shelburne to Sydney and Briar Island to Amherst. I've developed programs for schools, consulted for the Culture Division, served on the Nova Scotia Arts Council, and worked with the Canada Council and 15 other major arts and heritage organizations and funders from across the country. I recognize the importance of the private-public partnership that underpins these sectors and the necessity of ensuring a healthy ecosystem that supports amateur, emerging, mid-level, and large-scale endeavor. The funding that government invests in arts, culture, and heritage is small compared to the resources from earned revenue and from the significant investment made by donors, corporate sponsors, and other funders. Further, large numbers of volunteers provide expertise, time, and considered judgment. Public investment leverages considerable return in terms of other funds and labor, in terms of actual dollar return generated. Arts and culture organizations, though often small and under-resourced, are efficient, have high levels of accountability for their use of public funds, and effectively do more with their dollars than one might believe possible. While the hard dollar truths make a strong case, the soft returns are equally important. The arts build vibrant communities, reinforce values in history, support mental and physical health, offer important growth opportunities for children and adults, grow tourism, and strengthen profile and recognition for our province. Nova Scotia has winners of Oscars, Grammys, Junos, Emmys, and the Giller Prize, as well as any number of other major arts awards. Touring companies like Mermaid and Tubi Theatre are world-renowned. Symphony Nova Scotia, Neptune Theatre, and the Nova Scotia Tattoo are institutions
You have about a minute left.
that bring in large audiences, support many arts professionals, and engage community through outreach education and free public performance. Smaller organizations like Wonderneath and the Africville Heritage Trust, Motion Dance, Ross Farm, and the Nova Scotia Youth Orchestra pull well above their weight, build youth and community, and offer underserved populations important resources. These aren't fat cats who can afford to cut back. They've been under-resourced and running lean for years. There's little room to trim expenses or make up lost public revenues. Proposed cutbacks threaten thousands of jobs, the loss of major talent, the loss of community history, education, and engagement opportunities, and a reduced provincial profile. These are not sectors that can rebuild quickly. We need to hear your voice in support of a revised bill and budget that provide real funding for culture. It's time to ensure that government supports the deep and lasting contribution that this sector brings.
Thank you very much. So a lot of that wasn't related to Bill 198, so I'll ask the MLAs to sort of frame their questions so the answers can be framed on Bill 198. MLA Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate your presentation, Ms. Richmond. I want to talk about the Financial Measures Act in particular. What you stated was there wasn't anything in the bill to support arts and culture, and I think, knowing how rich, from hearing from other folks who have been here, how rich our province is in that, were you disappointed to not see any of that information in the bill, and what would you have liked to have seen in that particular Financial Measures Act?
So just before I acknowledge it, just the Financial Measures Act, Bill 198, there's several clauses, 48 pages. Try to frame your answers around that particular piece of legislation, not the budget, if you could. So Mrs. Richmond, go ahead.
I can tell you that, thank you for letting me speak. I can tell you that I haven't read the full bill, but my understanding is that there could have been measures that would have supported culture and heritage and the arts more fully within the context. As I look at the rest of the parts of the bill that I did read, I thought, why are we not seeing anything here that would entrench and support our commitment to culture and heritage?
Thank you. Any further questions? MLA Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate that because there are 20 bills and 137 clauses in the particular Financial Measures Act, and there only are not even a handful that actually deal with finances, in particular for the province. A lot of it has to do with clear cutting and forestry and easements and such. So I say this because, as someone who likes to read line by line, there are a lot of pieces in there that are really interesting to read. And if there were something that maybe would have stood out, what would that be for you? Within the context of the bill, yes. Thank you.
Mrs. Richmond, go ahead.
I'm trying to think about what might be the most interesting thing for me from that section. Maybe the changes to the Community Easements Act and the Conservation Easements Act to shift termination of those easements to a Supreme Court decision. I think that's an interesting, rather than a ministerial decision, and to address administrative inefficiencies. I think that's something that one might consider to be a valuable aspect.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? Hearing none, thank you very much for coming in today. We appreciate your contribution. We'll call upon our next witness, J. Aaron Roy. Thank you very much for coming today.
Hello, everybody.
We'll ask you to introduce yourself, indicate any organization you may be representing, if any. Following that, we'll have a 5-minute presentation followed by questions from MLAs. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So my name is J. Aaron Roy, he, him pronouns. I am a local small business owner who's taking time off running my business right now to be here, and I'm a concerned citizen representing myself.
Great. Go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for the time today to speak on the Financial Measures Act. I will be referencing multiple clauses within the bill. Nova Scotia is my home. I love and care for the people here. I was born here, and I run my small business, and I built a life here. My business supports and showcases local authors and artists proudly. This rather large bill hurts many people that I care about. When you remove perfectly fine revenue streams like the Bridge Commission and tolls, or making a tax reduction that only helps a few at the very top, and then take away funding from groups of people who are already struggling, what do you think that tells Nova Scotians? Moves like this show us that government cares more about corporations than small businesses like mine. The way this bill has been presented also doesn't allow citizens to speak to it in a fulsome way, but the implications of this bill will surely affect all of us for many years. It feels like the government is not on the side of the people who represent Nova Scotia the best. You know, authors like Rachel Reid, Andre Fenton, Shirley Cromwell, Chad Lucas, artists like Kate Beaton from Cape Breton, Steve McNiven, and Jenny Johnson, and so many more incredible creators who contribute greatly to our economy and the reputation for excellence on a global scale, they live here. I could sit here and name hundreds of authors and artists from this province who are represented in my business. It's a vibrant community of folks who build the reasons for all of us who live here and for all of us to stay here. Rachel Reid, our own Rachel Reid, says the arts are why I live here in Nova Scotia. All of it starts with community and having access to funding, spaces, and resources. The arts are not frivolous, she says, they are crucial. The people who live and create here matter, and they should matter to you. As a child of an incredible artist and an educator, the arts are very dear to me. The arts welcomes everyone. It is a safe space. Arts and culture is our history. It's essential for understanding ourselves and our role as treaty people first and foremost. The arts is architecture for us to be able to grow and build in the first place. The arts is representation, which matters more than some of you may realize. It turns dreams into support programs, into realities, into livelihoods in Nova Scotia. The arts is community, accessibility, creativity, it's mental health support, it's healthcare. Along with tourism, arts is the most powerful economic driver in our province. Tourism brings in $3.7 billion, arts and culture $2.6 billion. As a business owner, I can tell you, making cuts to economic drivers makes absolutely no business sense. So, a government that claims to love Nova Scotia isn't showing that in this bill. This bill does not contain Nova Scotian values. Love is support, not whatever this is. So please reverse the cuts. We need you to go back and start again. We deserve better. I would like to end my time here with a quote for you for your consideration by the great Fred Rogers. He also advocated for the arts. And this song goes, "What do you do with the mad that you feel? When you feel so mad you could bite. When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong, and nothing you do seems very right. What do you do? Do you punch a bag? Do you pound some clay or some dough? Do you round up friends for a game of tag or see how fast you can go? It's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong and be able to do something else instead and think this song. I can stop when I want to, stop when I wish. Stop, 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 anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this. and know that the feeling is really mine. Thank you for your time, and may your conscience be your guide.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll now open up to questions from MLAs. MLA Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Rogers is one of my favorites, and I was just talking about him yesterday. I appreciate the presentation. I think you made a point about the bill, about the revenue that we could be gaining, instead we're not gaining. What were your thoughts on that when you seen the bill? Like, you know, considering the fact that this is a Financial Measures Act, we're in a deficit right now. Like, tell me what you thought about that particular piece.
Go ahead, sorry.
Thank you. I felt that this omnibus bill feels rather malicious. It feels like it was almost planned to take away the tolls and the Bridge Commission and 1% tax. And it seems that we want to give money to millionaires to have a sailboat competition. You know, it seems like this bill is set up in a way to confuse Nova Scotians, and that doesn't feel like a government that represents Nova Scotian values.
Emily Marbracat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. And this is something we've all been talking about. Like, ultimately, we're talking about the FMA, but that $40 million of Bridge Commission money needs to be found somewhere else. You're putting $300 million immediately on the bottom line of the province, and now these programs suffer because of it. I want to talk about your business, though, and just give us an idea, because, you know, the government talks about supporting small business. Well, here's a small business that's going to be severely impacted potentially by what's happening. So if you could give us, like, what this means for you and how you, as you said, you've established your life here, you run your business, you care about the people in your community. So if you could elaborate on that, that would be great.
Mr. Roy.
Thank you for the question and the question previous. It's not easy running a small business. It's the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life. Part of my business is I have a youth drop-in center right in the heart of my store. So I work a lot with children who are at risk. I do a lot of programming with them to make them feel safe. And that was inspired by my mom running an art class when I was young and giving me a safe space. So art, I find, is very healing. Spaces like small businesses are very healing for the community. That's a place for them to gather. And I read the whole bill, and I didn't find any supports for small businesses. I see lots of supports for large corporations, but I see this government leaving small businesses in the dust. Programs that I access to help my business become more accessible were cut, like the accessibility program. So I see this government not caring about small business, and that hurts me very much as a Nova Scotian who's lived here for 42 years.
Any further questions? MLA Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say that I'm glad that you read the whole bill. I think, you know, more Nova Scotians need to actually, you know, look through, because there's a lot of things that sometimes we miss by skimming through. And you did mention, I mean, my colleague mentioned the bridge, but as well, you mentioned, what was the other piece? See, now I'm lost in the bridge. But regardless, that those were the two large revenue losses that we no longer see. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, could there have been something different? Like, could there have been something put forward that might, you know, change the way that we see how this bill is being put forward to us?
Mr. Roy, 30 seconds.
Yes, I see everything could be different. Indeed, also the casino getting a tax reduction for moving. I need to move my business at some point. I've outgrown my space. I sure would like some help like that. But this government doesn't seem to care about the small businesses that are the backbone of this province. And some of our best revenue drivers, you know, Rachel Reed, her books made $633 million last quarter, and she's a friend and comes in and signs copies, so that helps me. So the future of losing the Publishers Fund and things like that is a humongous mistake that this government needs to fix.
Thank you very much for your presentation today. We appreciate you coming in. We're going to move on to our next witness, and it is virtual. It's Dr. Sarah Philby. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for coming in. We can hear you loud and clear. Please identify yourself, indicate any organization that you may be representing, if any. Follow that with, we'll have 5 minutes for a statement, then followed up by MLA questions. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Sarah Philby, and I'm appearing as an individual.
Great. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. My perspective is shaped by research on the impacts of income inequality, my doctoral research on managing complexity, and my time as Assistant Deputy Minister of Economic Development at the Federal Department of Indian and Northern Affairs, where I saw firsthand how economic development disconnected from community well-being often deepens vulnerability. I believe we all share the goal of building a stronger, more sustainable and resilient Nova Scotia. I am concerned some choices in the budget and Bill 198 risk doing the opposite. I have many concerns, however, today focus on reductions to arts, culture, heritage, and other community supports, and how choices within Bill 198 reinforce these reductions. Clause 62 waives the deed transfer tax for casinos, and Clause 64 dissolves the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission, both of which remove or redirect potential public revenue streams. Clause 68 increases the financial institution's capital tax, which in Nova Scotia primarily affects League Savings and Mortgage, a subsidiary of Atlantic Central, a cooperative community-focused lender, risking reducing its capacity to provide mortgages without implications for housing affordability. These measures highlight a broader concern. We are narrowing some revenue resources and placing pressure on others while reducing investments in the very community supports that underpin long-term economic strength. Economic development is never purely economic, it is always socio-economic. While investments in natural resource development, infrastructure, and businesses are important, decades of research show that long-term prosperity depends on also investing in people, including arts, culture, heritage, and social supports. Failure to do so is likely to lead to communities where it is harder, not easier, for people to live, work, and raise families. Growth without these investments tends to bypass the marginalized and those at the lower ends of the economic scale, increasing income inequality and worsening social outcomes. Community capacity, social connection, and cultural vitality are foundational to quality of life, health outcomes, and sustained economic success, strengthening social cohesion, supporting innovation, and making communities attractive to people and businesses alike. The government maintains it is not cutting health care, but proposed reductions risk weakening the social conditions supporting health, leading over time to poorer outcomes and higher system costs. Arts, culture, heritage, and community support are often treated as discretionary, but every dollar invested in the arts generates significant economic activity. In Nova Scotia, the sector contributed $2.6 billion to GDP in 23, supporting about 22,000 jobs. Yet this budget reduces funding to dozens of programs supporting community museums, festivals, youth arts initiatives, and local cultural institutions, which in many places, particularly rural ones, are economic and social anchors, keeping people connected and local economies active, just like arenas, libraries, and community halls. I have seen firsthand how traffic to stores, businesses, and local restaurants increases when our playhouse hosts an event. The government frames this budget as building sustainability and resilience, but leading research shows that resilience depends on access to both social and physical resources when needed. And despite minor restorations, this budget reduces such supports. Budgets show not only what a government values, but what it is prepared to weaken, and I leave you with a few questions. If our goal is sustainability, why would we reduce investments in community supports and in arts, culture, and heritage, despite clear evidence that they are foundational to long-term growth, health, and economic success? If these sectors generate jobs, tourism, and economic activity, especially in rural Nova Scotia, why would we weaken them? Why would we reduce or redirect public revenue streams while scaling back the very investments that make communities viable? And why would we place additional strain on community-based financial institutions supporting housing during an affordability crisis? Nova Scotians deserve a government that invests in their long-term well-being, weighing the interests of future generations as carefully as current political priorities. Cuts that provide short-term savings yet cause long-term damage must be avoided. Budgets are about choices, and the ones we make now will determine whether Nova Scotia grows stronger or simply more unequal. As it says in Luke 12:48, "To whom much has been given, much will be required." Nova Scotians have placed considerable trust in this government. With that trust comes the responsibility to ensure today's choices strengthen both the economy and communities for the long term. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Philby. Open up the floor now for questions from MLAs. MLA Wilson.
Thank you for your comments and your suggestions, your ideas. I guess my question, open the floor, is what would you like to see added or deleted or changed in the Financial Measures Act?
Dr. Philby.
Thank you. It's not specifically as to what will be added or changed or deleted, although certainly the clause that I mentioned are problematic and would make a difference. I was speaking to the broad-term impact of the type of approach and thus the needs for changes to the Bill 198 and to the budget.
MLA Wilson.
Can you speak to what change in process that led to Bill 198 that you'd like to see?
Dr. Philby.
I would like to see that the budget and the Bill 198 and the various other pieces of legislation be based upon more of a sort of an evidence-informed, taking into account the important research that we know. I would also like to see a more broad-based consultation, a true consultation that does not exist mainly in providing photo ops for those conducting it.
MLA Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dr. Philby. I appreciate your presentation today. I think I was going to ask a similar question as my colleague, but I also I want to point out that you said arts and culture, economic infrastructure, and as well, the fact that we all have choices to make here in this House and in legislature, and I think it does fall on us, and the information that you put forward needs an evidence base. I agree. I think that what we're seeing is a government that's doing work without consultation or without collaboration. That is what has been said by a number of other presenters. What would you consider, based on your own experience, something that would have been helpful while building this piece of legislation? What would have been helpful to be able to consider or to add?
Dr. Philby.
Look at a budget. It's not just a question of what you spend on, but it's also where you get your revenue. And for example, cuts to the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission, the recent cuts to the HST, none of those were necessarily demanded by the public, and certainly not in the consequence of the type of cuts that this government is telling us need to happen in order for those for the fiscal excesses. Sorry, the fiscal challenges to be raised. I would also add part of the problem is spending outside the budget. Which, again, is not done in consultation, nor is it clear as to what accountability there exists, which in our democracy should be required.
Great. See no further questions. We thank you very much for your contribution today. We're going to move on to our last presenter before lunch, Riley Rhodes. Thank you very much for coming in today. If you could identify yourself, please indicate any organization you're representing, if any. Following that, you'll have 5 minutes to present, and then there'll be questions from MLAs. Go ahead.
Before I start, I feel the need to clarify. I'm not a special interest group. I'm a constituent of this province. I'm not putting a negative spin on things. I'm giving a perspective I don't believe you have considered. I'm not here on the request of any person, party, or organization. I'm here because this bill is harmful to me, my friends, and my community. I'm not your enemy, and it's really sad that I feel that I need to say that. Before I dive into any of the details of this bill, I'm going to give an example. You cut little Susie's after-school ballet program. You don't think past. We'll save a few cents. But in reality, there are so many Susies, and now Susie's ballet teacher needs income assistance because she's lost a good chunk of her students. Susie's mom now needs to pick little Susie up from school. So little Susie's mom leaves work earlier every day. So Susie's mom has less hours and less pay. So Susie's mom now buys bread and berries from No Frills instead of the farmer's market. So now the baker and the farmer, the local baker and farmer, have less sales. And perhaps they close their business. Perhaps they need income assistance. Perhaps they sell their business or take their business to another province. This bill is bigger than any one service. This will impact the entire community in ways I don't think you understand. Let's look at a few highlights from Tim Houston's cuts. First, the Brain Repair Center in advanced education. Our doctors don't need to learn about brains. No worries, all provincial funding is cut. Next up, oh, wait a minute. The entire first page is 100% cuts to advanced education, including 3 programs for PhDs in education. No worries, we don't need teachers. I had planned to print out the summary of the cuts that the government had released with all of the reference numbers, but I assume, as you are the government, you also have the reference numbers and whatnot that the government has released. Reference number 41 through 49, 100% cuts to physical activity programs, including one for toddlers and another that reduces traffic congestion. I'm sure that'll have no ramifications on the health of Nova Scotians. Speaking of the health of Nova Scotians, why is it that the endometriosis clinic is open 1 day a week? If cis men in this province were puking from the pain that they are in on a consistent basis, this would not be a fight. This is a disrespect to every woman in this province. It's disgusting. 1 day a week. Shameful. Reference number 60, 92, and 93. When asked about closing 12 museums, this government said we have more museums than any other province, as if that's a problem to be fixed. Nova Scotia isn't other provinces. Our love of our history and our culture is what makes Nova Scotia special. After that, we have several pages of art cuts. I grew up in the West End. The closest park to where I lived was the one by Barnes Hill, and in the 2000s, there was a decommissioned splash pad, keyword being decommissioned. It was a 6-inch deep pit filled with broken bottles and used needles that I had to pass to get to the swing set. Do you want to know who cleaned it up? It wasn't the province. It wasn't the municipality. It wasn't the parks department. It was an arts nonprofit, specifically the Art Bikers. They cleaned it up. They maintained it. They painted a giant snakes and ladders board that was not only safe, but contributed to this province and the safety of our children. When you cut arts, you cut the safety of this province and our children. There's a lot of cuts I don't have time to cover, but let's quickly jump ahead to opportunities in social development on page 11. If you look at page, I didn't have time to print the screenshots, but if you, the internal child and youth policy describes child and youth caring programs as what most would consider to be group homes for foster children, and reference number 230 shows 100% cut in provincial funding. When you specifically, Minister, were the Minister, you specifically MLA, were the Minister of Community Services, I contacted you attempted to contact you several times regarding the fact that when I was in care, there were no spare blankets for incoming youth in group homes. That has not been changed. There have been no changes regarding requirements for group homes in either the internal neither the internal policy nor bill nor the Child and Youth Act. So we are cutting the money that these organizations have, and they already don't have enough money. This is crazy.
Thank you very much. The time for statements up. We will go to MLA questions, but sometimes MLAs allow people to finish. So any questions from MLAs? MLA Hanson.
If you'd like to finish, we can allow you to have some time.
Go ahead.
To conclude, Tim Houston is deprioritizing the following non-exhaustive list: medical and education, Nova Scotian authors, traffic decongestion, Nova Scotian history, Nova Scotian culture, community and children's safety, food security, teachers, hearing care and dementia care, flood infrastructure, and lastly, Tim Houston is continuing to deprioritize the youth in provincial care, whom he and the Minister of Opportunities and Social Development have a legal obligation towards.
Thank you for your presentation. Any further questions? MLA Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here today and presenting. I know that it's not easy to be able to speak up about the things that are happening around you, but as well, this is the reality of a lot of folks that will be feeling the brunt of what happens after we pass the bill. So right now, we're discussing the Financial Measures Act, and I said this earlier, that has 20 bills in it and 137 clauses, and not one of those parts of the bill or parts of the clauses speak to the effects that you're saying right now in terms of how do we make things better. And that's what we've heard from folks across the province while we're sitting here in public bills. So what would you like to see moving forward in this particular bill that would be beneficial or could impact Nova Scotians in a positive way?
Mrs. Rhodes, go ahead.
I would love for this government to scrap the entire thing and come up with something new. I think we need to stop giving handouts to billionaires who don't need it. There's, what was it? I think $1 million going towards the sale in Nova Scotia. No cuts to them. No cuts to Tim Houston's buddies. No cuts, tax cuts that the government could use, as it so claims that they're so broke. But we don't need billionaires' money. That makes a lot of sense.
Great. Any
Hope
further
that answers your
questions?
question.
MLA Marburkett.
Thank you, and thank you for coming in. So I'll ask this question because you talk very passionately about the supports for youth at risk. Just however you want to answer it. So what would you do with the $40 million of revenue that the bridge tolls brought in that now the government has to find that's taken away from programs?
Mrs. Rhodes, go ahead.
I would increase funding to group homes. I would also create a division where group homes had increased monitoring. So things like blankets. We should not be giving our children who come into, vulnerable children who come into care should not be given bare mattresses. That's ludicrous, if I may. I have countless ideas, and now my brain is going blank.
You have a couple of minutes, so take your time.
I would also increase the endometriosis clinic to at least 3 to 4 days. I personally spent all of last week in debilitating amounts of pain. I spent 2 days in the ER because of pain. Still have no answers as to what is specifically wrong, but it's likely endometriosis. This province and medicine in general has such a disdain for women in this province that the endometriosis clinic is open 1 day a week. They have such a long wait list, and yet they are open 1 day a week.
Thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate you coming in. We're going to recess until 3 o'clock. So recess until 3 o'clock. Thank you all committee members and the Legislative Council, and we'll see you then.